When he was supposed to be the legendary hero, he chose farming, then she arrived. The Demon Queen came to kill him, so he tossed the sacred sword into wood. He hid, somehow he defeated her anyway. The prophecy should have ended there. Instead, things got worse. The Demon Queen did not look afraid at all. In fact, she looked intrigued. Valyriia Thorn smiled right from his ruined squash patch. That smile was terrifying. He had not just survived a legendary boss battle. He had caught her dangerous attention. Now, Valyriia was on his farm. She came to slaughter a legendary hero while he was sprinting across half-acre farm. Clutching damp laundry under one arm and holding smoked fish, the sky split open in purple fury. His tomato starts bent sideways under the wind. Atlas, the legendary hero sword, slammed itself right into his open palm. The rules were simple. Whoever holds Atlas must slay the terrifying Thorn Queen. But his rule was simpler. Fighting meant his crops and spine would be destroyed. So he threw the sacred blade into his woodpile and yelled for help. He told Bolt to hide. The heavy sword hit the logs, clanking loudly. The blade sounded offended. Then, the Demon Queen descended into a squash patch. Valyriia did not walk out of the storm. She made the storm kneel. Dark lightning folded behind her back. The wet mud dried and started smoking. She stared at him, then at the wood, then right back at him. She ordered him to pick it up. He just held up his fish. That was a mistake. Valyriia lifted one finger. The entire farm went silent. Not quiet, dead silent. The heavy rain literally froze halfway down the sky. The weather itself waited for permission. Then, her finger snapped directly downward. A void of black fire opened. Bolt instantly stepped out from the rain. The mechanical dog was waist-high, dented, and built entirely from cheap salvaged parts. He was made to scare melon thieves. His left ear sat permanently crooked. His copper tail clicked when he lied. He barked once at the void. The metal pup opened a hatch in his chest, taking the blast. The deadly magic turned into warm, gentle rain. Shadows watched from the ditches. Desperate people wrapped in torn blankets had followed her storm to see a hero. They wanted to watch him die before another brutal war consumed their lives. He did not know their stories yet. He only knew they were staring. It fell as polite farm rain, watering his fresh tomato starts in rows. The soot washed off his laundry. Warm steam rose gently over his trout. Valyriia and the refugees just stared. Honestly, who can blame them? Even Atlas rattled inside the woodpile, muffled beneath a split pine log. The sword grumbled that this was definitely not proper hero conduct. He ignored it. He called Bolt a good boy. Bolt wagged his metal tail happily. Valyriia had eyes of cold fury. Having lived 2 lives, he knew rage. He had dealt with angry landlords, bosses, and even one highly aggressive goose. But Valyriia was different. Her anger was quiet, deeply focused. She spoke up. She said she waited 15 years for the legendary hero to finally emerge. He was mostly just in his farm barn. She sneered at the sword and its judgment. Atlas snapped upright in the woodpile, shouting that he chose correctly. He kicked a heavy log over it. The crowd gasped in unison. That only mattered later. Valyriia came to settle a prophecy. Her followers came to watch that prophecy fail. Instead, they watched the sacred sword get treated. Like cheap kindling, Valyriia smiled. At the time, he thought that smile meant she was amused. Then every fence post on the farm bent toward her. Fine, she said, if you refuse the blade, I will burn the farm and see what you protect first. That was when the Havocer barrier showed itself. For 15 years, it had been invisible, a soft edge around the fields. Monsters always avoided it. Tax collectors got lost near it, and door-to-door priests developed a sudden interest in other roads. He had not questioned it much. A man getting one quiet miracle should not poke it with a shovel. But when Valyria's second spell hit, the barrier appeared over the farm like a glass bowl made of old sunlight. For half a breath it held, then it cracked. A line of white fire ran over the sky, down the barn roof, across the fence, and under his boots. The tomato start stood up straight. The chicken coop exploded open. Those chickens made tactical retreat under the wagon. Valyriia looked delighted. Now we are being honest, she said, but he was not being honest. He was doing math. 1 demon queen, 1 cracked barrier, 1 dog who had just turned the apocalypse into irrigation, 1 sword yelling under firewood, and 1 tray of trout cooling in his hands. So he did what any serious hero would do. He set the trout on the porch. Before it got dropped, Valyria's smile faded by 1 tiny degree. That tiny degree saved his life, because while she was deciding whether he had insulted her on purpose, Bolt moved. He was not fast like a wolf, he was fast like a throne. Tool, 1 second he was by the rain barrel, the next he was between Valyriia. In the tomato bed, Copper paws digging trenches in the mud. Valyriia spread her hand, black spears fell out of the sky, bolts back opened, the laundry lines snapped loose from their posts, wrapped around the spears, and spun them into a tight bundle. The bundle landed beside his compost heap. The compost heap glowed. He took 1 step away from it. A pumpkin vine burst out, grabbed the black spears and swallowed them like noodles. The largest pumpkin on that vine grew a face, then it burped smoke. The ditch people screamed and crawled backward. Valyriia did not move. She looked at the pumpkin. She looked at Bolt. She looked at him. You fed my curse to produce, she muttered. He replied, I did not ask it to do that. You expect me to believe that, she asked. He barely believed it himself. Her gaze sharpened again, and this time the air around her turned heavy. His teeth hurt, the nails in the porch pulled halfway out and pointed at her like they wanted to surrender. A blue panel flashed in front of his face. The beginner system had not spoken to him in years, mostly because he kept closing it. Root correction. Available hero points 7,412. System action, retrieve atlas. He waved the panel away with his elbow. The panel came back, suggested action, stop farming. He waved harder. Now there are 3 things you should know about his first life, and none of them deserved a speech. While Valyriia Thorn was charging another spell, he had worked too many years for other people, dying completely exhausted. And when a glowing system offered him a sword, a prophecy, and a corpse-paved path, he bought seeds instead. Seeds, fence wire, a solid smokehouse and repair manuals, plus a guardian chassis on clearance, because the seller claimed it was aggressive toward carts. That was Bolt, and the full extent of his preparation. Valyriia raised both hands. Purple clouds gathered above Havocer, forming a ring. Outside the fence, the cracked barrier groaned as shapes began pushing through the gap. Horned beasts, mud monsters, and skinny things with too many elbows. The ditch people saw the monsters and bolted. One older man tripped near the road. A mud monster lunged, and he grabbed Atlas from the wood pile by instinct, throwing it like a spear. The sword flew clean over that monster, spun sideways, and pinned the old man's blanket to a fence post. The old man screamed, but Atlas screamed louder, stop throwing me. Bolt engaged his target, striking it in the ribs, opening his jaw to fire a short white beam that turned the creature into a pile of damp clay. The older man stopped screaming, looking first at the sword holding his blanket, then at him. He saved me with the holy blade, he whispered. In truth, he had missed by 6 feet. The woman beside him grabbed his arm. The hero humiliated the sacred sword and still saved you. That was not what happened, but Valyriia heard it. Her face changed. Not fear, not yet, only interest, which was worse. So this is your method, she said, lowering the world's guard with nonsense. He pulled Atlas free and jammed it point first into the mud. His method was simply asking her to leave. She asks if she is a guest, but she is standing on squash. Valyriia looked down. Her boot had crushed 3 young squash plants. She lifted her foot. He wished he could say he made her do that, but he did not. He figured she was just offended that the plants looked disappointed. Then Bolt barked again, sharper this time. The cracked barrier was opening wider. More monsters pressed near the north fence. The ditch people had scattered, but they were not gone. They were watching from rocks, wagons, and the ditch grass like spectators, witnessing a trial they had already lost. Valyriia noticed them too. Her expression went cold. His audience had come to watch his death. She mocked, asking if he would protect them. No, the word came out too fast, making some onlookers flinch. He swallowed, adding that Bolt would. Bolt's ears snapped forward. Valyriia laughed once, a beautiful chilling sound. If he did not care about living, she would kill the dog first. Then she moved, not spellcasting this time, but crossing the field faster than a falling roof. Her hand cut through the rain, aiming directly at Bolt's head. Bolt ducked, and the porch steps launched sideways. That was no metaphor. Those steps had been loose since winter. Apparently, Bolt had installed something under them without telling him. The whole step box fired like a spring trap, slamming into Valyria's ankle and exploded into boards. Valyriia stumbled a single inch, making the onlookers gasp. 1 inch was enough for Bolt to leap, clamping his metal jaws around the black aura at Valyria's wrist and pulling. The aura tore away like old cloth. Valyria's eyes widened, staring at Bolt as if he had stopped being a pet. Then she struck him. Bolt crashed through the rack, the rain barrel, and the bean trellis, landing in the carrot bed with smoke pouring from his shoulder. His Chest went ice cold. Bolt's tail clicked once, still alive. Valyriia turned back to him. Now she demanded, pick up the sword. Atlas vibrated in the mud beside him, far. Too eager, he picked it up anyway as the watchers leaned forward. The beginner. System flashed so bright it hurt. Rue restored, target marked, Queen Valyriia. He needs to strike now. He looks at Valyriia, then at Bolt smoking in the carrots. He sees the cracked barrier, and the monsters squeezing through because of her. She shattered the only quiet spell keeping his farm hidden. He walks to the porch. He hangs the sword Atlas on a broken coat hook, making the blade gag. Valyriia stares at the hook. He grabs the emergency handcuffs from a nearby nail. They are definitely not heroic, just regular cuffs built for a rogue raccoon. A clever raccoon raided his pantry 3 nights in a row. He upgraded them. He used leftover system parts because raccoons here negotiate like real criminals. Valyriia spots the cuffs. Smiling, she asks if he actually intends to bind her. He replies he just wants to keep her from killing his dog during a checkup. She mocks his plan, but suddenly Bolt fires directly from the carrot patch. Not a laser beam this time, a net of silver wire bursts around her. The wires do not hold her, nor do they need to, they just make her pause. He slaps the handcuffs around her wrist, and they lock instantly. Valyria's dark aura flares, shattering the porch window and rattling every jar inside. The cuffs stay locked. Valyriia looks at them, then stares right at him. Then she looks at Atlas, still hanging on the porch hook like a cheap umbrella. He has 3 seconds before she recovers, and he uses every single one. He yanks Bolt's smoking collar backward and shouts for porch protocol. Bolt's tail clicks twice, and the farm immediately answers. Fence posts light up, the laundry line snaps into a web. The chimney fires white heat straight into the storm. The ground beneath her turns into slick, messy mud, not magic mud, plain farm mud. Her boots slip. Can you believe this legendary demon queen, who conquered kingdoms and broke armies, just slipped in his yard and crashed right to one knee? Watchers, monsters, and Atlas see it. Oh, the sword mutters. Valyria's face goes blank with terrifying silence. That silent look is terrifying. Then the black ring above the farm collapses. Her massive gathered magic comes crashing down as Bolt shoves him back. The chimney splits open. The rain barrel floats right off the ground. The cracked barrier catches the falling spell, bending inward with a terrible shriek. For one brief second, Havocer Farm is trapped inside a dark star. Then Bolt's chest hatch opens, draining the dark energy right through him. Through the fence and straight into his wet rows of tomatoes. The energy flows deep into the ground. Suddenly, every seed sprouts at once. Every monster trapped inside the fence melts into harmless wet dirt. Watchers outside drop flat. Valyriia Thorn takes one slow step forward. Her eyes roll back and she collapses onto his porch. The storm vanishes. The Havocer barrier tears wide open from hill to creek like ripping cloth. Nobody moves, then the ditchwoman points at his porch and screams. She yells that the hero defeated the Thorn Queen with a dog. No, the older man cries out, clutching the sword Atlas tightly to his chest. He insists the farmer spared her. Another watcher backs away, already running. He thinks the hero tossed the holy sword because he did not need it. They flee. Rumors always move faster than monsters, a lesson he learned quickly. Bolt limped over to the porch and nudged Valyria's hand, but she did not wake. The beginner system floats in front of his face again, pointing to a neutralized target. Execute final strike. Atlas hums from the old man's arms. As if trying to look useful, he closes the system window and takes Atlas back, dragging Valyriia inside by her shoulders and locking the second cuff around the iron leg of his kitchen table. He did not do this out of bravery. He did it because executing a final boss seemed like a massive, terrifying choice. That would invite divine trouble, plus she had shattered his barrier, outside. Beyond the ripped edge of the farm, monsters begin circling the fence. Instead of running away, the watchers are already gone, spreading a completely twisted version of what happened. Inside, Valyriia Thorn lies on his kitchen floor, soaked, bound, and breathing smoke through her teeth. Atlas hangs on the wall near the door. Bolt sits between her and the pantry, his shoulder sparking. Suddenly, Valyriia opens her eyes. The handcuffs are no magical ritual, though Valyriia Thorn thinks they are. She wakes on his kitchen floor, one wrist locked to the iron table leg, one boot still muddy from his yard. Looking like a woman deciding if this humiliation counts as a war crime, he stands across the room holding a skillet and a sharp pantry knife in his Hands, they are for breakfast, not her, but that detail does not calm her. She accuses him of chaining her beside food, but he actually chained her away. Her eyes dart to the pantry, and Bolt follows her gaze, his injured shoulder is crudely patched with copper nails and the last clean towel the man owned. He is still smoking, standing between the Demon Queen and his master's dried apples. Like an old sheriff guarding his town, Valyriia looks down at the heavy cuff and smiles. Instantly, the table leg bends and the kitchen spoons jump. But the cuff holds. Valyriia stops smiling. That is the second best thing the cups have ever achieved, right behind catching that annoying raccoon. Atlas rattles on the wall, warning that the restraints contain unauthorized, highly dangerous hero-grade residue. He points his skillet at the sword, warning it that it is on thin ice. Valyria's gaze snaps to Atlas, then back to him. She notes that he binds sacred tools, starves divine weapons, commands monsters, and yet still dares to pretend to be afraid. He insists he is not pretending, but his hands are shaking. Unfortunately that. Honestly, his shaking hands just make him look way more suspicious. Outside, the broken Havenacre barrier flickers like torn glass. The vast field beyond it has changed overnight. Terrifying beasts gather at the farm's edge, sniffing the open air. The ditch people are gone, but their footprints remain in the mud, all pointing directly away from his house. The rumor has already spread before breakfast. That is bad, but the open barrier is far worse. Executing Valyriia might end one problem while triggering every terrible prophecy the system ever warned him about. But letting her walk away would leave his home completely vulnerable to ancient evils that have waited 15 years to enter. He desperately needs a third option now. Unfortunately, his best backup plan is just soup. Valyriia drags the table leg closer. She demands her release, but he firmly replies that killing is forbidden here. It is a rule, not a rejection. She leans closer, the chains stretching tight. She claims she makes the rules, but he counters, not in his kitchen. Valyriia glares at the pantry again, the exact spot that saved him twice that morning. A blue beginner system panel blinks beside the stove as he chops up peppers. Enemy captive, route restored. Suggested action, interrogate. He swiped it away with his elbow. The annoying panel pops up again with a new suggestion to execute. He closes it. With the pepper bowl, Valyriia watches the screen vanish, noting that he has a system he used to. It still answers, just like Atlas, but he ignores them both. Atlas rattles on the wall. He dumps peppers into the skillet, the sharp smell hitting Valyriia. First, her chin lifts slightly, as if appetite is an enemy spy she just caught. Trespassing, she asks what it is. He replies it is stew, warning her that peppers bite back. Valyriia snaps that she does not eat surrender offerings. Fine, this is breakfast. She looks annoyed enough to survive another minute, so he unlocks her cuffs. Bolt growls. Valyriia stays dead still, which is always the problem with people like her. When they do not move, it never means safety. It just means they're next. Move is what matters. He places the key on the table and steps back. He tells her she can leave, but warns if she breaks his barrier. Bolt goes after her ankles. Bolt's tail clicks as Valyriia stares at him, and the beast stares back. The old kitchen table creaks, standing between them like a witness waiting for history to make up its mind, when suddenly a massive monster slams into the fence outside. The impact shakes flour off the shelf as he looks out the window at a horned beast pushing through the torn barrier, its jaw wide enough to swallow a whole sheep. Valyriia raises a bored hand to strike, but he firmly tells her no, stopping her. As the monster chews the fence, she tells him to move, but he forbids vaporizing near the herb bed. When she protests it is eating his fence, he says it can take the criticism. She glares at him as if he just invented a new level of disrespect, but Bolt limps over, opens his jaw, and fires a bright pulse that turns the monster instantly into wet clay. Seeing this, two other monsters step back from the perimeter. Then they do something completely unexpected. They stare straight at Valyriia through the window and bow. She notices their submission, and he notices her sharp reaction. This changes everything. Her presence does not just attract danger, it actually organizes it. He places a bowl of pepper stew down and tells her to eat. She turns slowly from the window, asking if he is commanding her. No, he is just feeding her. Her eyes drop to the bowl. The stew is not pretty, just red broth, beans, smoked trout, cracked peppers, onions, and a spoon standing straight up in the middle. Because he made it so thick, any proper hero would have demanded an oath. But he just adds cornbread. Valyriia sits, not because he told her to, obviously. She makes that clear by claiming the seat like a prize, then picks up the Spoon, that very first bite changes everything. Her shoulders lock up and the windows fog over. The black mark beneath her left eye flares purple, then gold, then the fiery red of his pepper. Bolt ducks down as Atlas whispers from the wall, "This is no ordinary food." Valyriia swallows and a circle of black fire opens under her chair. It does not burn, but every floor scratch suddenly heals with fresh wood. The cracked table legs straighten and the broken latch on the pantry snaps itself shut. Valyria's pupils narrow. The slits, accusing him of poisoning her, as she feels her body changing after one bite. He shrugs. That breakfast does that. She grips her spoon hard, enough to bend it right around her fingers. Sweat slowly beaded on her forehead, which was impossible in 3 different ways. Valyriia had walked right through annihilation. Magic, like it was just weather. Pepper stew made her sweat. She stood so fast her chair flew backward. Bolt shifted. He grabbed the pitcher of milk. Valyriia pointed the spoon right at his throat, demanding an antidote. He held up the pitcher. She looked at it, then at the stew, then back at him. It looked like pride and appetite were trying to kill each other across her face. He was not inside her head. He only saw the spoon tremble. She snatched the pitcher, drank, and froze again. The milk glowed faintly as it touched her lips. The black fire under her chair turned soft blue. Outside, the monsters at the fence knelt, not attacking, not fleeing, they just knelt. Valyriia lowered the pitcher. He had seen monarchs in old workplace videos accept awards with far less dignity than she used to swallow milk from his dented pitcher. Then she sat back down and took another bite. He did not speak. Sometimes a man survives simply by letting breakfast do the talking. Valyriia ate half the bowl before glaring at him. "This is a coercive potion," she said. "It is stew," he replied. "It makes my magic answer the soil." "That is inconvenient," he said. "It tasted too good." "That is usually the onions," he remarked. Her eyes flashed and she ate the cornbread. The pantry door popped open by itself. Every jar of preserves rolled to the front of the shelf like nervous citizens presenting tribute. Valyriia stared at them. He stared at them. Bolt put one paw over the pantry threshold. "No," he told the jars. The jars stopped. Valyriia slowly looked at him. "You command the pantry," she noted. "Only on good days," he replied. She leaned back in her conquered chair and studied the window. Outside, the monsters were still kneeling. One skinny creature with too many elbows turned around and hissed at another monster trying to creep toward the fence. The second monster backed away. The farm had a new fence. Unfortunately, that new shield was sitting at his table, eating his stew and accusing him of crimes. Valyriia saw it too. Her expression sharpened in a way he did not like. "If I remain," she said, "they will not cross. If you leave, they might. If I kill you, they will worship the ashes. Let us not test that," he said. "If I spare you, the prophecy remains insulting." That prophecy has been insulting him for years. Atlas snapped against the wall hook, saying, "I can hear you." "Good," he replied. Valyriia tapped the bent spoon against the bowl. Every tap made the monsters outside lower their heads another inch. Then she smiled, smaller this time, saying she would stay. "No," he retorted, making her blink. That was the first time he surprised her. "Without machinery," he pointed at the bowl. "You can stay under conditions," he said. "I do not accept conditions," she snapped. "You accepted cornbread," he countered. Bolt made a sound almost like a cough. Valyria's gaze cut to him. The mechanical dog looked away too. Late, he counted on his fingers, because rules sound less suicidal when they come with fingers. 1. No killing guests. 2. No burning crops. 3. Pantry access requires asking. 4. If you break something, you help fix it. 5. No calling breakfast poison unless you finish the bowl. Valyriia watched his hand. Like each finger was an enemy commander. Then she lifted the bowl and drank the rest of the stew. A pulse of warm pressure spread from the kitchen through the porch across the fields and out to the torn line of the half-acre barrier. The broken edge stopped flickering. The monsters outside turned. Outside, the monsters guarding the ditch road fall silent. Valyriia sets down her empty bowl. She insists she is only staying for research, pointing her bent spoon directly at him. Her target includes his food, his beast, and his impossible farm. He tells her his couch is not a throne, but she ignores him, claiming it for her study. She walks into his front room and sits down. The couch lets out a soft, traitorous creak. Instantly, every monster outside the fence turns around, turning their backs to the house. They face the road. He opens the front door, unable to ignore such a loud signal. The largest beast stands right at the gate, with a broken fence rail in its teeth. Spotting him, it lowers its massive head and spits the wood neatly into the mud. Nearby, a smaller creature tries to crawl under the fence toward his chicken coop. Valyriia stays on the couch. She merely turns the spoon over in her hand. Instantly, the smaller monster flattens itself to the ground in sheer terror. It backs away from his chickens. Naturally, the birds notice and things get weird. The boldest hen struts to the gate, pecking the giant mud monster right on its nose. She struts back like a conqueror, and the giant beast does not even try to retaliate. Bolt looks at him, he looks at Valyriia. She looks incredibly pleased with herself. This means he needs to ruin her smug mood before this becomes her official policy. He tells her no eating anyone who stays off the porch. She simply lifts an eyebrow. She asks if he is ordering her aura around, but he insists he is just ruling his yard. She says his yard obeys her. He grunts that his yard has terrible taste. The spoon bends in her hand. Outside, a refugee creeps back to grab a dropped blanket. As she grabs it from the ditch, the largest monster turns toward her threateningly. The woman freezes in terror, crying. Valyriia watches the scene unfold without moving. He steps onto the porch and commands the monster to leave her alone. It completely ignores him. Honestly, that is fair. He probably wouldn't listen to himself either, so he turns back inside. He stares at Valyriia. She holds his gaze as if helping a human is beneath her. Saving a terrified civilian seems beneath every title she has ever held. Still, she relents. She flicks her spoon once. The beast instantly lowers its head and backs off. The refugee grabs her blanket and bolts, running so fast she leaves a shoe in the mud. The monster faces outward. The fence is still broken, but the farm finally has a boundary. It is a fragile, dangerous boundary, held together by a woman who still wants him dead. But a line is a line. He heads back inside to deal with his dangerous guest. He takes the spoon from Valyriia before she bends it into metal shrapnel. Surprisingly, she lets him. This minor surrender annoys her far more than the cuffs ever did. To compensate, she claims his couch blanket and the left side of his pantry. She also claims a blue mug. He allows the mug but firmly rejects the pantry. They bicker over dried apples for 12 seconds. Unsurprisingly, she wins custody of 3 slices. Right then, the magical sword Atlas chooses to fall right off his wall hook. The blade hits the floor and slides awkwardly under a table, completely ruining its grand entrance. From the dusty floor, Atlas complains that he objects to housing an enemy. Valyriia simply leans over the couch arm and stares down at the weapon. Instantly, the sword goes dead silent. It is the most intense silence in the room. When Valyriia reaches for the hilt with 2 fingers, Atlas panics. The sword sparks blue and shoots backward into an umbrella bucket, knocking it over. 3 umbrellas collapse right on top of the sacred blade as Valyriia stares blankly. She looked at him with fresh suspicion. Even your prophecy weapon fears your house rules. It hates damp places, fled from me and hid under umbrellas. You punish sacred weapons with domestic shame. He just stores things where they fit. She sat back on the couch as he watched her face change. She had not lost to him. In any way she would admit, as far as he could tell, that meant she could not leave yet. The farm had insulted her, fed her, bound her, and protected itself. From her and hidden rules inside breakfast, for Valyriia that was not defeat, that was research bait. He did not enjoy the victory, but it was a win. The Demon Queen had not surrendered, she had not apologized, and she had not become safe, but she was staying and the farm was no longer bleeding open. The pantry was disputed territory and the couch had defected. The sacred sword was sulking on a wall hook, and for about 6 peaceful seconds he believed breakfast had solved the day. Then Bolt's ears rose. He limped to the door, shoving it open with his head and barking toward the north fence. The guard monsters moved aside. Something came through the broken line of the old barrier. It was no monster. Bolt returned, dragging 2 bodies across the grass. Bloodied man was slumped over his back, one arm locked around a young woman who looked even worse. Her sleeve was torn, her hair matted with mud, black. Metal teeth were stamped into the hunter's. Bolt dragged behind them. One hunter was still breathing. He saw Valyriia sitting on his couch and tried to crawl backward with both legs broken. The bloodied man lifted his head just enough to see him. Please, he whispered, do not give us to the Black Gear Guild. Bolt parked the strangers beside the carrots like he had brought home damaged farm equipment. The bloodied man tried to bow from the mud. The young woman tried to stand, failed, and still put herself between him and Valyriia. That told him 2 things fast. They were terrified and they were not terrified of him yet. The man pressed one hand to his ribs. Tobin Grell, he said, this is my daughter, Leia Grell. Leia looked at Valyriia on his couch, then at Atlas on the wall, then at Bolt's smoking shoulder. Her voice came out Horse asking if they were dead, not in the carrots, he said. Valyriia stood, the room. Temperature dropped, the surviving hunter outside whimpered and tried to crawl under Bolt's paw. Talk about a terrible spot to be in, if he threw Tobin and Lair out, the hunters would take them, if he kept them and they talked. Halfaker Farm became a target with a broken barrier, a demon queen on the couch and a sword that could not stop complaining, so he chose the option. With the least immediate screaming, he pointed toward the kitchen, inside tea. First, threats after. Valyriia slowly turned her head. You invite bait into house. He invites bleeding people off his carrots. They were followed, he noticed. The bodies, the surviving hunter laughed once through broken teeth, but Bolt stepped on his cloak, ending the laugh. He got Tobin into a chair and Leia onto the bench. Valyriia stayed by the doorway, arms folded, looking like she wanted to solve this with a crater. Bolt blocked the outer door. Atlas rattled on the wall hard enough to chip plaster. The beginner system flashed beside the kettle, warning of an unknown bloodline. To silence the prompt, he shut it with the tea tin. The tea tin was old, dented, and full of dried herbs he grew. He avoided buying medicine. Trusting strangers was just too risky. He poured boiling water over the leaves, setting the first hot mug before Tobin. He stared at it like a royal pardon. It is just tea, the host said. Valyriia muttered that he said the same about his stew. Tobin drank anyway. The forehead cut sealed before he lowered the mug. Leia gasped in shock. Tobin gripped the table. Fresh green leaves sprouted from the bare wood. His back straightened. His graying beard suddenly darkened at the roots. The broken rib under his shirt snapped back into place. Everyone heard it. He stared at the mug, then looked at the host, dropping to one knee. Get up, the host insisted. Tobin bowed lower. Valyriia watched with narrow eyes. That is the correct reaction, she muttered. No, it is not, the host countered. Leia grabbed Tobin. Her hand brushed the second mug and tea jumped upward. It did not spill, it jumped. Leia froze as her wrist bruises vanished. A faint green glow crawled under her skin like vines behind glass. Her mud-caked hair parted to reveal sharp, pointed half-elf ears. Outside, the surviving hunter saw the magical glow and began to weep. Please, he cried out, they will find out. Valyriia crossed the room. She moved so fast the candle flames bent. She stared down at him. Who will know, she demanded. Tobin spoke up, mentioning the black gear. His voice sounded stronger now, fueled by a deep, rising anger. He stood tall, not celebrating, but ready to face an old enemy. He realized they were not hunting them for some cheap ransom money. They wanted Illa's blood to help rebuild their ancient, fallen queen. The room went dead silent. A heavy tension filled the air. The very queen they wanted to rebuild sat right near the pantry. She still smelled of pepper stew, looking completely insulted by the news. Rebuild, she spat. Her sheer offense made the hunter shake with fear. The host raised his hand, warning her there would be no killing. Valyriia kept her gaze locked. Your rules are getting repetitive, she said. That makes them easy to remember, he replied. Suddenly, the hunter's sleeve burned. A dark brand appeared beneath the fabric, a circle of biting metal teeth. It was the same design as the symbol found on the bolt outside. The black gear mark pulsed once. Suddenly, the fallen hunters twitched. Leia braced herself while Tobin instinctively reached for a weapon he lacked. Our host had no weapons either, unless you counted a kettle and sword. He also had a jealous dog and an easily offended demon queen. Now look at this. To stop the panic, he opened a drawer. Inside lay a deck of hand-painted cards, never meant to be weapons. He had drawn them during harsh winters when snow kept him trapped. Even back then, the system kept offering him violent, bloody updates. The simple cards showed shields, beasts, dogs, and a rising sun. He just missed normal board games. Tobin saw them and went pale. Valyriia smiled, sensing the hidden, terrifying power within the deck. Leia wiped her bloody lip and asked what kind of game this was. Valyriia called it a trial, while Tobin recognized it as a holy weapon. Finally, someone respects household weapons. He places the deck on the table. He tells Tobin to draw a card. Tobin looks at Leia, pure panic on his face. Drawing wrong surely means death to him, while refusing means getting thrown out into the cold. Both ideas are dead wrong, but absolute panic makes for terrible math. Tobin draws one card showing a shield. Suddenly, the front window shatters into pieces. A black bolt punches through the glass. Immediately, the shield card flashes. A translucent barrier appears right between Tobin and the incoming projectile. The bolt hits the shield, flattens, and slides down like melting paint. Tobin stares at his card, Leia watches the young man, while Valyriia glares at Tobin. Like he received something too valuable. That was not in the rules, the young man says. Valyriia smirks, replying that it was indeed in the rules, he just did not know them. Outside, another hunter rises, pulled up by a burning black gear mark. His head tilts unnaturally, and thick black steam leaks from his teeth. Before he can even react, Leia quickly snatches a card showing a beast. The card glows vibrant green. A massive wooden boar bursts straight out of the floor. It smashes right through the door and hits the rising hunter hard in the chest. The enemy flies backward across the yard, disappearing straight into the garden. But the boar keeps charging ahead, straight toward the nearby road. 3 refugees are hiding right behind the fence. The young man jumps over the bench. He crashes down, grabs Leia's wrist, and slams his hand over the beast card. Stop, he commands. Just like that, the wooden boar freezes in its tracks. Its tusks stop inches from a terrified woman's blanket. She is frozen. She drops to her knees in relief. Leia turns pale and Tobin grabs her hand. The wooden beast crumbles into harmless wood chips. He takes the card back from Leia. Placing it face down, he gasps out a new rule about using magic near civilians. No using magic without asking first, he warns. Leia nods rapidly. Valyriia looks at the wood chips, then notes that he gives rules to gifts. He corrects her, he only gives rules to the people holding them. She glances at the sword atlas, which goes quiet. That rule would save many lives. But right now, it only saves 3 innocent refugees from a painful end. Suddenly, the third card flips over all on its own, a clown. Nobody touches it. Somehow, that makes the situation feel way worse. The tiny clown pops out, lands on the table, bows, and throws glitter around. Sparkling glitter instantly transforms into heavy chains that fly through the window. Chains tightly bind the ankles of 2 crawling hunters outside. Then the clown turns around, slaps its own backside, and mocks them. One hunter screams in rage that the creature is mocking their gear. The clown splats him with a pie made of pure, blinding sunlight. He admits he only painted that as a joke. Valyriia glares. She remarks his jokes have no boundaries. The card bounces back in bows. At that moment, Tobin's shield card dims as a red line appears. Leia tries to reach out, but Valyriia instantly grabs her wrist. She warns her not to interrupt a binding. Leia glares at her furiously. Leia protests he is her father, but Valyriia warns panicking could kill him. Her anger fades immediately. Though she wants to fight, she stays still. Releasing Tobin's shoulder, the farmer watched him set the card down as red lines snapped. His shield card glowed white and settled. Valyriia watched him with sudden, genuine interest. She noted he obeyed before greed woke up. What if he had kept holding on to it? The card answered by turning unbelievably heavy. It cracked the table leg. Tobin backed away, saying he understood. That was when the farmer decided Tobin could leave with the deck, not because of strength. Overpowered jerks had already ruined his morning. Tobin was simply terrified. Desperate but wise enough to drop power when told. That mattered so much more. Valyriia caught the farmer's hand, sliding toward the card deck, before Tobin even realized why. You cannot be serious, she warned. The farmer replied he usually was when making a mistake. She said he barely understood them. They saved him, despite nearly eating him. So he was giving them to the only man who actually listened when told to stop. Valyriia stepped close, making the candle burn blue. She accused him of denying her. Denied pantry access, she watched him hand strangers weapons that made clowns attack corpses. He asked if she was jealous. The room froze. Realizing his mistake, he shut up as Valyriia smiled slowly, warning him to be careful. The farmer pushed the deck forward. Tobin hesitated, staring at the cards. He glanced outside. The dark-marked hunters were rising. Tobin warned that taking them made the farm an enemy target. The farmer replied it already was. Tobin feared failing, but the farmer told him not to. Especially near civilians. That got a painful human laugh out of Tobin. Tobin accepted the deck. Every card flashed once. It seemed every illustration opened an eye. Tobin staggered, and Leia caught him. Valyriia looked genuinely annoyed, while Atlas grumbled about not getting a special ceremony. The farmer reminded him he was thrown into a wood pile, which Atlas kept bringing up. A hunter twitched by the fence. Leia reached for the deck, then hesitated. She looked at the farmer first. That tiny pause mattered. He nodded, and she drew. Pulling a dog card, she watched a wooden hound hop out and salute Bolt. It barked at the fence, sounding more like a scraping chair than a real dog. Bolt looked insulted. The card dog did not care. It quickly herded the returning refugees away from the fence, keeping them safe. The wooden hound saved them before any hunter could strike, then sat wagging its square tail. It vanished back into its card. Leia finally exhaled. His new rule already paid off, she asked before unleashing her next major miracle. Outside, the hunters attacked. Tobin moved first. He stepped onto the porch with Leia right behind him, drawing the shield card. Drawing before the first black bolt hit, he snapped a massive shield across the yard. A hunter tried to climb over, but Tobin quickly drew the beast card. The wooden boar slammed into the hunter, tearing the black gear mark right off his sleeve. It skittered like a beetle until Bolt pinned it. Valyriia instantly crushed the bug with her heel before it could crawl toward the porch. No lectures, just heal, crack, smoke. Only one rule needed. Power now, soul later, and the bill always comes crawling. Just then, two more rushed out. Two more hunters rushed from the dark trees, prompting Tobin to draw the clown card. The painted clown appeared on his shoulder, saluted Leia, and hurled a glowing pie forward. The pie explodes, metal chains instantly yank the hunter upside down. He dangles helpless. Nearby, a second hunter slips past the protective shield with a blade. The hooked blade is raised. Leia draws her card immediately, glancing back for approval. The farmer nods, go. Leia plays her glow card, unleashing a brilliant, warm light. The light wraps around Tobin's arms, instantly healing his deep cuts. His stance hardens. Tobin draws his drain card and slams it onto the dirt. Black marks on the remaining hunters begin to hiss, pouring out dark smoke. The card drags the foul energy out of them, condensing it into a tiny, pea-sized bead. They collapse, still alive. The clown card suddenly punts the cracked bead into the compost. The compost pile burps. He decides not to ask questions. The watching refugees are stunned. They saw everything. Someone points a trembling finger at Tobin, whispering the title Cardmaster. No, Tobin protests quickly, but Leia grabs his sleeve and softly calls him Dad. They chant it anyway, Cardmaster. That is how Tobin Gra earned his legendary title. No grand halls, no banners, no ceremony. It all happens right on his muddy porch. The clown card bullies corrupted hunters, while his compost pile develops its own wild opinions. Now Tobin bows to him again. This time the farmer stops him halfway. Go before more arrive, he urges. Tobin holds the true deck tight against his chest. They owe him their lives, but the farmer only demands absolute card safety from now on. Leia nods in agreement. No using magical gifts around civilians. Valyriia steps beside him. The father and daughter head toward the road. Outside, the dangerous beasts do not attack. They simply lower their heads to Valyria's fierce presence, letting the travelers pass. That should have felt like a massive win. It did, until the northern sky splits wide open. A terrifying black circle of burning metal teeth carves right through the heavy clouds. Suddenly, the fallen hunter corpses begin to smoke. The horrified refugees scream and scatter. Tobin clutches his deck. Leia looks back, realizing her father's new gift is actually a target. Beside him, Valyria's face turns perfectly still, not angry, not amused, just ice cold. A dangerous stillness. He remembers seeing that exact look right before his farm nearly exploded. The eerie gear symbol pulses again, turning the damp fields into a pale, glowing silver. He honestly thought this magical deck was leaving his house as a harmless farewell gift. He had no idea that trying to steal it would awaken a terrible ancient nightmare. This is Valyria's oldest fear, and the terrifying black gear symbol refuses to fade away. Even after the travelers leave his farm, the dark, burning mark continues to follow them. Seeing that mark is what finally forces Valyriia to stop pretending she does not care. Over the north road, the massive circle of metal teeth pulses like a chewing sky. Tobin clutches the true deck to his chest in absolute terror. Leia looks back at the porch, desperately wishing she could run home to safety. But the rule is simple now. Powerful gifts leaving this farm do not stay quiet for long. If he does nothing to help them, the consequences will be absolutely devastating. His first real gift will drag immense danger to the city before Tobin even learns to shuffle. So he packs a travel basket filled with tomatoes, fresh bread, and pepper jam. Valyriia watches him closely from the couch, cradling her stolen blue mug. She dryly remarks that he cannot chase down a massive sky wound with vegetables. He snaps back that he is chasing the travelers, as the deck acts like a stubborn relative. That deck is trouble. Suddenly, Atlas rattles inside the umbrella bucket, chiming in. Atlas boasts he also acts before being understood, leaving the farmer to complain. Before Quill could understand her, Valyriia stood. The monsters at the fence lowered there. Heads before she reached the door. No public craters, he told her. She smiled. She claimed he was starting with insults early, but he was starting with rules. Rules that got more suicidal by the hour. She came anyway. Bolt stayed behind to guard Havocer. Because the torn barrier still leaked, he did not like that order. His tail clicked 3 times, which meant he was either offended or preparing to disobey. In a way Quill would discover later, he pretended not to hear it. That was usually how Bolt won. The North Road had already turned into a moving rumor. The same refugees who had watched Valyriia fall on his porch were walking ahead of them, behind them, and beside them, all telling a different version of his life. In one version, he had made the Demon Queen a meal. In another, Bolt was the real hero and he was his stable boy. His least favorite version involved Atlas. Choosing him because he had pure hands, Atlas had insisted on coming after. Hearing that, he had wrapped the sword in burlap and tied it to the underside of the tomato basket. Atlas accused him of smuggling prophecy under produce. He was just protecting produce from prophecy. A refugee woman heard the sword and crossed herself with both hands. Valyriia looked pleased for exactly half a second, until the woman whispered that the hero even silences holy weapons. Then Valyriia looked at him like the rumor had stolen her insult. Half a mile from Stonebridge City, the black gear symbol pulsed overhead. A strip of ash fell onto the road and burned into a tusk-shaped protection tag nailed to a wagon. The tag had the same bite pattern as the sky mark, smaller and cheaper. Wagon driver ripped it off and threw it into the ditch. The tag crawled back toward his wheel. Leia reached for her deck. Quill called her name and she stopped. Breathed once, repeating shield only. Suddenly, the shield card flashed. Small barn door shield dropped over the tag and pinned it until Valyriia stepped on it. The tag cracked into smoke. The wagon driver bowed to Leia, then to Tobin, then accidentally to Quill's basket. That was how he learned of Stonebridge City's problem before seeing its walls. The Tusk crew had been selling protection merch that acted too much like Blackar and not enough like protection. Stonebridge City looked peaceful from the hill. That was the first lie. Valyria's old statue stood over the main square, 10 times taller than any person, black stone polished smooth by rain. Beneath it, shops were open but quiet, curtains were drawn. People moved with that careful walk city folks use when they know someone is watching and nobody admits who. Then they reached the square and found the Tusk crew charging orphans protection money. Under Valyria's statue, a thick man in a Tusk stamped vest had one boot on it. Donation crate, a ledger man held a list of names. 2 knife men blocked the shelter door. Children watched from behind a cracked window. In front of them stood a young woman with a torn sleeve, a cloth doll tucked under one arm, and a spine that looked too stubborn for her tired face. Nell. Quill. Tobin whispered from beside him. She runs the shelter. Nell had bruises on one cheek. She still put herself between the crew and the door. The Tusk crew boss tapped the ledger with a ringed finger. Debt doubled, rumor says. She hid black gear bait last night, but Nell's voice was steady enough to make the bruises looked angrier now. He hid those children, acting like bait, looking for sympathy. Want sympathy? Valyriia stepped forward. He caught her sleeve and her eyes snapped to his hand. No public craters, he repeated softly under the statue's shadow. It covered her hood. If Stonebridge City recognized the Thorn Queen standing beneath her own monument, they would not cheer. They would kneel, run, or start a war in the square before lunch. Valyriia leaned close enough that his ear went cold. She muttered that the boss used her statue for debt. And you want me to stay quiet? He just wanted her to stay small for 5 minutes. That almost killed him. Her smile thinned, small but only temporarily. The Tusk boss noticed them then. His eyes locked onto Tobin first, eyeing the cloth-wrapped deck case at his belt, which rumor already dressed in pure gold. Then the boss eyed Illa's half-elf ears, Nell's doll, and then his basket. Finally, he stared at Valyria's hood. Greed has a sound if you listen closely. He did not know the boss's plan yet, only the twitchy gestures people make when they start pricing someone else's belongings. The boss pointed at his basket, demanding market tribute. He looked around. Tribute for simple tomatoes or unregistered produce entering a protected square. The boss smiled and tapped the Tusk emblem on his vest. It was protection against anyone forgetting who ruled the streets. Nell looked at him, urgently warning him not to fight here. That warning belonged to Valyriia, but she said it to him instead. He couldn't tell if he felt respected or insulted. Suddenly, the ledger man snatched a tomato from the top of his basket. It wasn't even his best tomato. It had a scarred stem and a crooked shape. Because the East Row grew too fast after Valyria's Blackar incident. The ledger man held it up, shouting royal tribute to the crowd. Valyria's hood dipped. Royal, she muttered. He quickly stepped on her boot before she finished that thought. The ledger man tossed the tomato toward a thug who missed it entirely. The tomato rolled across the cold stones and stopped beside a sick boy sitting against the shelter wall. The boy's face was gray, fever sweat dampening his hair. A black rash crawled up his neck in tooth-shaped marks. The thug ordered him to back off. The knife man moved in fast, shouting to leave it. The boy grabbed the tomato anyway, biting into it with the desperate hunger of a starving street kid. Wait, did that really just happen? The square went dead silent as the rash peeled back. It fled. Healthy color rushed into his cheeks. He coughed once, spitting out black smoke onto the cold ground, then sat up straight. The smoke tried to crawl away, but Valyriia crushed it underfoot without looking. The boy stared at the tomato core in his hands. Nell covered her mouth while the ledger man turned pale. The crowd shifted. They surged toward his basket, ignoring the Tusk crew entirely. That was when the thugs realized they hadn't taken simple vegetables. They had stolen priceless treasure in broad daylight, handing it to a dying kid. The boss's smug smile tightened. The boss declared the basket evidence of illegal alchemy. No, he countered, it is just lunch. Shaking woman in the crowd held up 2 gold coins. For just one tomato, another man screamed, I will buy even the stem. The knife man made a quick business decision. He snatched one of his pepper jam jars and popped the lid with his dirty thumb, laughing that this city now paid gold for simple sauce. The jar breathed on him. Red steam shot straight up his nose. He dropped the jar, clutching his face, stumbling backward right into the donation basin beneath Valyria's statue. The rash under his eye vanished instantly, along with one eyebrow. The crowd watched a thug get healed and humbled by simple breakfast spread. That was a better lesson than any sermon Ethan could have given. The knifeman crawled out, still choking on pepper smoke, wheezing that the jar was worth more than his entire room. Another thug muttered that his room had fleas, making the townsfolk laugh. The Tusk crew absolutely hated being mocked. Men who rule through fear cannot stand this. The exact moment fear turns into a mockery, the knifemen exchanged tense looks. The ledger keeper whispered out. The boss hit him across the mouth with the heavy ledger. That was a mistake. The crowd saw it, Nell noticed, and children. Windows watched. Even the stone statue seemed to loom heavier over the open square. The leader pointed right at Ethan, demanding a test. A thug dragged a brass magic gauge from the nearby shelter steps. Stonebridge City used these devices for guild hiring, tax assessments, and mocking poor folks who claimed they possessed magic. Any person just placed their hand on the metal plate. The needle rose, and onlookers pretended this score determined their true value. The boss slammed his palm down first, making the needle jump straight to a red tusk symbol in the center. His thugs cheered as if he had slain a dragon. Instead of touching simple furniture, he sneered at Ethan, calling the farmer up next. Tobin stepped forward, telling Ethan he did not have to do this, but Ethan calmly placed his hand down. The needle did not even twitch. The device clicked once, a tiny bell rang, and a word glowed right above his fingers in harsh, mocking light. Instantly, onlookers began to laugh. Not everyone, but enough. A thug stepped behind Ethan with a hot branding iron, shaped like a tusk, calling it city law. Nell moved before Tobin could. She slapped her torn parchment of debt directly onto the man's wrist, causing the paper to erupt with the very same red magic that had been draining her sanctuary dry. The thug shrieked, dropping the branding iron as the contract began to smoke in her hand. The written words squirmed like tiny black teeth, trying to reform back into debt numbers. Ethan grabbed a tomato leaf from his basket, pressing it flat onto the smoking paper while whispering a soft refusal. Instantly, the leaf turned silver, freezing the dark text. Nell stared in total disbelief at the clean space where her shelter's name had once been. The surrounding townsfolk witnessed it too. This crew was not merely demanding payments, they were actively feeding on despair. Seeing the crowd turn against him, the boss decided to get louder. And honestly, raising his voice is the oldest trick for a leader who is bleeding. He threw his arms wide, mockingly listing a zero magic farmer and escaping gambler, a cursed shelter girl, and a hooded woman too scared to show her face. But then Valyriia touched the gauge. Everyone felt the air bend around her. It stopped not because she lost, but because she held back. Its needle slowly dragged upward, shuddered, and landed on the same tusk rating as the gang leader. The thugs cheered even louder now, one of them mockingly welcoming her to their ranks. It was such an offensive gesture that Tobin gripped his weapon, ready for a bloody fight. But Leia quickly held his arm back, while Nell hid her face so they wouldn't see. Her quiet smirk, Valyriia glanced down at the reading, then back over toward Ethan. No one could read her face beneath that heavy cowl, but the entire square suddenly grew incredibly cold. She quietly murmured to Ethan that he must despise this situation far more than iron cuffs. The boss laughed right in her face, mockingly, but Valyria's slender fingers curled. The gauge cracked right down the middle, just a tiny bit, as he reached out. He placed his hand over hers before the square was destroyed, whispering to wait 5 minutes. She held still. Nobody in Stonebridge City understood the display. Valyriia Thorne could have wiped out the Tusk crew, the gauge, and the entire square. Instead, she let some street thug think he actually measured her. Then the boss turned back to him. "Here is the deal," the boss said. "The Gold Vault Labyrinth opens tonight with his crew. He must bring his miracle basket, the card master brings his deck, and Nell brings her doll. The hooded woman stays behind so nobody wanders off." Nell instantly stiffened while Tobin placed his hand over his deck. Yela reached for a card, then stopped, looking at him first. Good, the rule of the gift had survived the crowded square. The boss kept smiling. "Survive until the vault bell rings and the shelter debt is cleared. Fail and everything they brought pays the street. That is not a bet," Nell warned. "That is just business," the boss sneered. Suddenly, Valyria's hood turned slowly toward him. She did not even need to speak. He already knew it was a trap. The whole crowd knew it. The children in the shelter saw the danger so clearly that one started crying before anyone moved, but Nell's shelter was marked, and Tobin's deck was already a legendary rumor. His produce had just magically cured a deadly fever. If they walked away now, the Tusk crew would return under the cover of night, bringing more weapons and zero audience, so he took his tomato basket right back. The ledger man let go quickly. He looked at the boss, demanding the debt clear. Before they enter, the boss snorted. They had zero bargaining power, but Valyriia gently lifted a single finger inside her sleeve. The massive stone statue above them cracked. From crown to chin, a loose pebble fell, striking the boss's boot. He smiled warmly. "Because panic sometimes needs a calm cover. Before they enter," he repeated firmly. The boss glanced up at the cracked stone, at Valyria's hood, and then at the basket. As if calculating the true price of everything here, he tore the debt page straight out of his ledger and flung it at Nell's feet, who grabbed it with trembling hands. The kids behind the window cheered as the Tusk crew finally backed away from the door. That should have been the end, but it never is. The boss offered a mocking bow, gesturing toward the western gate where golden light shone through a dark stone archway. "See you tonight at the labyrinth," he sneered. "Bring that miracle basket, bring the card deck, bring the doll, and most importantly, bring the hood." His greedy gaze lingered on Valyriia, then Nell, and finally on the deck resting at Tobin's side. That really should have been warning enough. Instead, he gripped his basket of tomatoes, worth far more than actual gold, and followed that grinning thief straight into a dungeon designed to punish human greed. The legendary Gold Vault Labyrinth measured their worth before the heavy gate even closed. Standing under the black archway, the boss slapped the nearby brass gauge, forcing everyone to touch the plate like they were cattle being sold at an auction. He received the identical red tusk mark, while his hired goons got smaller ones. Tobin's deck flashed with a bright blue spark, making the watching crowd whisper in awe. Then Yela received a vibrant green pulse that smelled just like fresh leaves. Nell registered absolutely nothing, but the ragged cloth doll tucked under her arm suddenly opened its black button eye. Instantly the gauge shrieked, making 3 crewmen jump. The terrified children from the shelter quickly scrambled to hide right behind Nell. Nell hugged her doll tighter. Mo got a 0 again, making the boss laugh so hard he had to wipe his eyes. To them, the miracle farmer was just a pack mule. The knife man bowed at Mo's basket, treating it like cargo under new ownership. Mo pulled the basket behind his leg. Valyriia saw this and stepped closer to him, which made the thug quickly remember somewhere else he needed to stand. Valyriia touched the plate. The needle shivered like it had seen death in court and been forced to testify. Mo whispered to keep it small, drawing Valyria's gaze. The needle dropped, stopping right at the boss's red tusk mark. His laughter erupted again. Talk about a massive mistake. He actually chose to trust that gauge. The first rule of this gold vault was carved right over the arch. Plain letters: take what you can carry. Below it, a knife had scratched a second line: pay what you owe. The boss spread his arms, declaring that nobody leaves until the guardian wakes. Stay useful to get rich or get in his way, and The labyrinth keeps you, the gate slammed shut and stone swallowed. The daylight, the first chamber glittered with endless coins, gold cups and little statues of forgotten kings. The tusk crew rushed toward the piles like hungry dogs. Tobin stayed still. Leia stared at Mo while Nell watched the floor. Valyriia looked completely bored, which was actually worse than angry. When bored, Valyriia started inventing entertainment. Mo pulled 3 bananas from his basket. The boss stared, mocking him for bringing fruit. He only wanted Mo's basket. Nell's hands were shaking, and Illa's lip was split from the square. One of the younger knife men had a fever rash like the shelter boy, desperately trying to hide it under his collar. Mo gave a banana to Nell, one to Leia, and one to the sick knife man. Valyria's hood snapped toward him in sheer disbelief. The man had threatened children an hour ago, but Mo knew he might bleed on his tomatoes. The knife man wanted to refuse out of pride, but everything changed. Then the first trap woke. Gold coins lifted from the floor, unfolding into beetles with human teeth. The tusk crew stopped laughing as the beetles swarmed them. Nell, Leia, and the fevered knife man all bit their bananas at the exact same time. The chamber exploded with 3 brilliant colors. Green light wrapped around Leia's arms. She drew her shield card before the beetles reached Tobin, summoning a massive barrier that slammed down hard enough to flatten the front row of gold insects. Warm yellow light rolled over Nell, pulling her doll's seams tight. It kicked one button leg free of its cloth body, stabbing a beetle through the face with a needle. The fevered knife man turned bright red, screamed, and punched a beetle so hard it burst into coins. He stared in shock at his own fist, then at Mo. He whispered Mo's name, but Mo shook his head. That word saved him. A second knife man grabbed an apple from Mo's basket without asking. The fruit instantly rotted in his hand. It was completely rotted. Black juice ran between his fingers, and the sudden stench hit the chamber like a dead cellar. The terrified knife man dropped it and screamed. Valyriia smiled under her hood. The fruit has taste, and it has boundaries, Mo noted. The tusk crew boss saw the rotted apple, saw the glowing knife man, and still failed to learn his lesson. Greedy people rarely do, always believing rules are meant for someone else. He pointed deeper into the chamber, ordering the 0 to carry the basket, keeping the cardman in the middle and the shelter girl where he can see her. Nell flinched at that, but Valyriia did not. She stepped so close to the boss that the gold coins at his feet melted into little puddles. He swallowed hard, looking down at the gauge mark still glowing red on his wrist, remembering his misplaced confidence. He pointed out that they measured the same, while Valyria's voice remained soft. She admitted she grabbed the sleeve, but he snapped back, hating the word later. She knew the labyrinth made sure later arrived fast. Before reaching the bridge, the corridor opened into a massive room with a gold mouth carved right into the wall. Its gold lips were shut tight around a row of square teeth. The scratched warning appeared. Hey, what you owe? Seeing this, the tusk crew boss grinned and shoved Nell forward. He claimed the shelter girl owed. As Nell stumbled, her doll bit his sleeve and got swatted into the wall. The gold mouth opened, showing no treasure inside. Instead, a dark tunnel appeared, filled with little black tags stamped with a tusk in a tooth-marked circle. The shelter debt pages fluttered inside like a flock of dead birds. Nell's face turned white as the boss claimed the labyrinth always recognizes contracts. No, he disagreed. The mouth suddenly turned toward him, proving it was no metaphor. The whole wall bent. He grabbed a loaf of farm bread from his basket and threw it in before the teeth could reach Nell. The mouth bit down, bursting with bright gold light. The black tags inside caught fire one by one, and every single fake debt page screamed in a different adult voice. The terrified tusk crew backed away while Nell's doll crawled back to her ankle, clinging there with one of its button eyes cracked. Then the gold mouth spat a pile of clean coins at Nell's feet, each one stamped with a tiny shelter door. Nell stared, realizing it paid a year of repairs. The boss stared harder. He dragged them into the labyrinth just to possess the basket. Instead, the basket had just forced the labyrinth to pay the very girl he wanted to crush. That should have taught him the basket was off limits, but it only made him covet it more. The second chamber featured a gold chain bridge hanging over a deep pit filled with sleeping statues. Each one had a black earmark buried deep in its stone chest, pulsing faintly under its skin. The greedy boss wanted to pry them loose, but Tobin warned that those marks were still alive. The boss snapped back that made them valuable, sending 2 knifemen onto the bridge. Instantly, the chains snapped, and the statues opened their eyes. Nell's doll climbed onto her shoulder, hissing threateningly through its tiny thread teeth. The falling knifeman screamed, but Valyriia simply folded her arms. They chose greed. And chose a boss. He noted that was usually worse, asking her nicely to step in. Since he was never above basic manners when people were falling into a gear. Valyriia clicked her tongue, flicked a finger, and pinned both falling knifemen to the wall by their belts, saving them before the statues could react. The crew saw it, the boss saw it. His expression changed, though not with fear yet. Calculation. He had watched healing fruit, rejected thieves, and cards blocking traps. He saw dolls stab beetles and a hooded woman move men with one finger. A smarter man would have apologized to the shelter, returned the debt pages twice, and retired to sell soup. The young man did not know his plan, only that he stopped looking at people and started looking at handles, straps, and sheer ownership. The corridor after the chain bridge tried one more trick. Golden mirrors rose up from the floor, showing everyone exactly what the labyrinth believed they desired most. The fevered knifeman saw himself completely healthy and ran face first right into the glass. It shattered into harmless straw simply because he had not reached for it with both hands. He stared at the scattered straw, stepping back like a man discovering self-restraint by accident. Tobin saw a crowded hall full of people chanting Card Master. He shut his eyes and placed one hand over the deck. The mirror dimmed. Leia saw green forest road with her mother's shadow at the far end. She almost moved. Tobin caught her shoulder and she did not fight him. Nell saw a shelter with no doors, no locks, and no dolls needed. Her broken doll pressed its cloth hand against her wrist until she breathed again. The young farmer saw half an acre with a fixed fence, quiet chickens. No one asking him to save anything. Then the mirror added a golden throne in his cabbage rose patch. He threw a potato at it. The mirror broke. Valyriia looked at the pieces, then at him, noting he rejected a throne with a potato in the raw road. The boss watched all of that and saw only one lesson. The labyrinth offered desire to people brave enough to take it. He looked at his basket again. That told him enough. The third chamber held no coins. It held a golden dragon statue chained to the floor by black roots. The statue was larger than his barn. Its wings were folded tight. Its head rested on its claws. A collar of dark metal teeth bit into its throat. Valyriia stopped walking. Not dramatically, that would be easier. Her stiff body remembered something her mouth refused to say. The boss noticed, and so did he. Cracked golden scales lay near the statue's front claw. The true deck at Tobin's side warmed and the cloth around it smoked. Leia grabbed the case, calling out. The boss moved, slamming his elbow into Tobin's ribs and ripping the deck case free. Tobin hit the floor. Leia drew a card. A knife man caught her wrist. Nell's doll leaped and bit his hand. The boss laughed and ran for his basket next. He swung the basket away, but the boss kicked his knee, sending him down hard enough to see sparks. The boss grabbed the basket, shoving 3 tomatoes and 2 bananas into his mouth and tore the cloth off the true deck. The cards flashed. The golden dragon statue opened one eye. The boss looked triumphant for half a second, then the fruit in his mouth turned black. His throat bulged. The red tusk mark on his wrist split open, and a black gear crawled out under his skin. Like a beetle trying to wear a man, he screamed, but greed kept both hands locked around the deck and basket. The black gear sank into his chest. Bone cracked and his vest tore. Tusks grew from his jaw, curving wrong to pierce his own cheek. The crew backed away, and Nell dragged Leia behind the broken shield. Tobin crawled toward the deck, one hand pressed tightly to his ribs. The mutated boss lifted his head. His eyes were black gears turning in wet sockets. He rasped out, demanding power now. The words came from his mouth, but they sounded borrowed. Valyria's hood fell back, and the chamber lost temperature. Every coin on the floor flattened. The mutated boss saw her face and laughed, blood down his chin, calling her the missing queen. The farmer did not know how he knew that. He only knew the black gear in his chest reacted to Valyriia like a starving dog. Smelling meat, he pointed one claw at the golden dragon, commanding it to wake and kneel. He demanded her old throne. The dragon statue blinked again. Valyriia whispered one word, marigold. The gold cracked, not like stone breaking, but like a living thing shedding a coffin. A massive golden dragon lifted her head. Black roots snapped around the beast's neck. Her eyes, molten and furious, locked onto Valyriia. For one tense breath, nobody moved. Then Marigold cried out. A dragon's cry is never gentle. The sound slammed into the chamber walls, shattering every fake crown in the treasure piles and sending 3 tusk crewmen flying onto their backs. Valyria's face changed. The farmer had seen her angry, hungry, proud, suspicious, or petty over pantry shelves. He had never seen her look so wounded. Suddenly, the mutated boss charged before the moment. Could breathe, he snarled that it was his, making that his last mistake. Marigold slammed one massive claw down, the floor buckled, and the boss vanished under golden talons. With the wet crunch of a rotten barrel bursting, the true deck shot free and skidded across the floor toward Leia. She snatched it, then looked at the farmer. Before drawing, even terrified, she remembered the rule. He nodded and she drew the drain card. The dark bead from the boss's black gear tried to crawl out from under Marigold's massive claw. The drain card dragged it into a black P. Nell's doll kicked the P into a crack, and Valyriia crushed it with her heel. No speech, just heel, crack, and smoke. The Tusk crew immediately dropped their weapons. The fevered knife man fell to his knees, vomiting black juice onto the gold floor. The fruit glow faded, leaving him alive and very eager for repentance. Tobin took the deck back with shaking hands, while Marigold lowered her enormous head until her snout touched the floor right in front of Valyriia. "My queen," the dragon said, her voice like metal dragged through fire. "You are gone." Valyriia didn't answer as the labyrinth gate opened behind them. The words over the arch changed back to "take what you can carry." Then the second line burned brighter: "Pay what you owe." The Tusk crew paid by crawling out without their boss, their ledger, their weapons, or their square. Nell carried the torn shelter debt page, Tobin carried the true deck, and the farmer carried his basket, now lighter by several tomatoes and a lot of trust in public invitations. Marigold followed them into the night, which made Stonebridge City discover a whole new category of panic. They didn't explain the dragon to the crowd. Sometimes explanations are just seasoning on disaster. Valyriia simply told Marigold to stay low. She tried, but a dragon staying low still looks like a golden roof with teeth. By the time they reached Havoc near dawn, Bolt was waiting at the gate, ears forward and his chest hatch wide open. Instant Marigold crossed the broken barrier line. Bolt fired the porch cannon. Marigold sneezed and the blast turned into sparks across her nose. Bolt barked like the universe had personally insulted him. "Bolt, no," the farmer shouted. Valyriia stepped between them and put a hand on Bolt's dented head. "She is mine," Valyriia said. Bolt's eyes flickered, his tail clicking twice. Blue system panel flashed over his collar, reading, "SAF list updated Marigold." Marigold lowered her head to sniff him. Bolt growled, but she just sneezed again. 3 apple trees bloomed out of season. For one stupid second, the farmer thought they had traded a street gang for a dragon and maybe come out ahead. Then Marigold looked past Valyriia at his broken porch, his torn barrier, and the monster line still guarding the road. 500 outside years, she said. The farmer stopped. Valyriia went perfectly still, Marigold's golden eyes dimming. "That is how long you were missing from the world, and Malrich Crow wears your absence like a crown." The Black GR Guild stopped searching for him. She glances toward the pepper Rose, the house in Valyriia. They are building a queen without him. Marigold's warning made Stonebridge City treat the true deck like salvation and bait at the same time. That is how cities work. If something saves them, they want rules around it. If something scares them, they want someone else standing closer to it. Tobin and Leia are suddenly useful. Nell is dangerous and he is still officially zero magic. Naturally, everyone feels comfortable asking him to explain miracles he barely survived. Valyria's answer is simple. "Let her burn the square," she says. "No public craters." She keeps saying that as if it improves with repetition. It does for her. They head back to Nell's shelter. Before the city turns fear into policy, the front room smells of soup, wet blankets, and old thread. Real children hide under tables and behind crates. 3 smaller figures sit by the window with blankets up to their chins. They smile at them, but then one blinks sideways. He stops. Nell notices his reaction and her face tightens, warning him they are not children. The figure lifts one cloth hand to wave. Doll joints show under the blanket. Valyria's shadow stretches across the floor, demanding an explanation. Nell hugs her doll to her ribs. When the Tusk crew first arrived, the little ones screamed. The dolls woke up screaming back. After that, the crew targeted the dolls first, giving the real children time to hide. The reality is too ugly to linger in this cozy room, so he moves before anyone can say more. A broken doll lies near the stove, its button eye cracked. Black thread leaks from its mouth. A tiny black gear splinter is lodged under its cloth chest, ticking like a bug in the wall. Valyriia raises one hand, making the dolls seem start to smoke. He steps between them, warning it is corrupted. She points out it is lying on the floor and could eat a child's face. He says he will fix its teeth first. Nell looks At him like he just offered to pet a bear trap. Valyriia looks worse, asking if he repairs curses now. He only repairs things that scare him to give his hands somewhere to. With the panic, he kneels, pulling farm thread from his pocket and threads. A needle with fingers that are only shaking a little, his beginner system. Flashes beside the stove, warning of a corrupted vessel and suggesting its destruction. He shuts it with his elbow. The broken doll snaps its head toward his hand and bites the needle. Nell gasps while Valyriia smiles as if he just proved her point. He flicks the doll on its button nose, calling it rude. The doll freezes. Nobody in the room breathes as he takes the needle back and stitches the torn mouth shut with farm thread. The black thread fights him. It hisses. It burns tiny holes in his sleeve and tries to crawl into his skin. Valyriia catches it. Between two fingers, the thread screams. She looks at him, saying this is the moment a sensible man would let her burn it. He has never been called sensible. He ties the final knot and presses a tomato leaf from his basket over the black gear splinter. The leaf turns silver, the splinter cracks, and the doll sits up. Nell covers her mouth while the real children peek out from hiding. The repaired doll stands on wobbly legs, looks at him, then Nell, and then drags a wooden spoon from the soup pot like a sword. Nell whispers, asking for its name. The doll tilts its head. He should have said he does not name other people's nightmares. Instead, he named the doll Rel. It tapped its wooden spoon against its stitched chest. The dark curse that was crawling through its frame folded inward, twisting around the simple thread to form a tiny shield over its heart. Rel marched straight to the door, climbed a stool, and stood guard. The children cheered. Nell cried silently. Valyriia just crossed her arms. He gave the curse a post, she noted, because it needed a job. She called him a complete menace with sewing supplies. That was the first time Nell laughed, a tiny broken laugh, but still a laugh. The shelter shifted around them, not quite healed, but no longer waiting to be hit. That should have been a win, but Stonebridge was too greedy for just one victory. By noon, two kinds of brave citizens had gathered outside the shelter. The first group wanted to burn every doll before they could turn into actual children. The second group wanted to lock the true deck away for public safety, which sounded heavily public and not safe at all. A captain reached for Tobin's card case, forcing him back. Leia prepared to draw, then stopped herself and looked at him. He scanned the crowd, the dolls in the window, the frightened children under the tables, and the officials pretending they had everything under control. No hiding room, he declared. If they want proof, they get proof. Right in the open where everyone can see who panics first. Valyriia smiled. Finally, a public humiliation, she whispered, but he called it a demonstration. The captain tried to reach again. Rel tapped his boot with its wooden spoon. He looked down at the doll, then at Valyria's hood, then at Leia's hand. Hovering over the deck, he discovered patience fast. By afternoon, the square had turned into an arena, not a formal meeting. He would have walked out. Talk about a massive gamble. This was a high-stakes public bet. Platform holding the true deck with both hands. Leia stood beside him, shoulders squared, her eyes scanning for civilians exactly the way he had taught her. Nell stood near the sheltered children with Rel at her feet. Valyriia stayed under her hood at his left, radiating enough heavy contempt to season the air. The sign over the platform read "Great Demonstration." He had not approved the word guild, but Tobin had. The boy looked guilty under his gaze. Cardmaster, the crowd whispered. Zero farmer, they said. Valyriia heard them whisper about him. The whisperer immediately found somewhere else to stand, a silver blade. Guild champion stepped onto the platform to test the deck. He wore polished armor, a white cloak, and the kind of calm face people trust because they have never had to watch it crack. The crowd cheered for him while even Tobin bowed. The champion raised one hand, declaring that Stonebridge City needs proof these cards protect citizens, not just their owners. That was fair. Then he looked at Nell, demanding proof that cursed dolls will not replace the children they claim to defend. That was not fair. Rel lifted its spoon, but he put one boot gently in front of the doll, telling it not yet. The champion noticed this and gave him a polite smile, asking if he commanded it too. No, he only negotiates with violent household objects. Valyriia made a soft sound that was almost approval. The crowd laughed. That laugh mattered, turning Rel from a monster to a menace with manners. It was not safety, but it was a much better starting line. The champion. 3 clay targets were placed along the platform edge. First card, no civilians touched. Leia looked at him first. He nodded. She drew the beast card. The wooden boar burst out, saw the crowd, and dug its hooves into the boards until Splinters flew, Leia whispered, targets only. The boar charged sideways, smashed all 3 clay targets, then sat down with its tusks pointed away from the front row. The child behind the rope clapped before his mother could stop him. Leia exhaled, the champion's smile warmed. Control was improving, that was the right reaction. It gave the city a reason to trust her instead of just fear. The deck, then he nodded again. Second card, defense. Leia drew the shield card. A barn door shield snapped into place between her and the champion. The crowd murmured, real murmurs, useful murmurs, the kind that move a city. 1 inch away from panic, the champion struck the shield with his sword. The shield held, he struck again. The card dimmed. Leia set it down before greed woke, just like Tobin had taught her. Good, the champion's smile warmed. Control confirmed. For one breath he thought the public part would work. Then the black ear under his armor woke up. It burst through his breastplate like a black flower made of teeth. The crowd screamed. The champion dropped his sword and grabbed his own chest. I did not, he choked. That was all he got out before. The gear wrapped his ribs and lifted him off the platform. Power now, soul later. No lecture was needed. The later had arrived in public. A city clerk near the platform shouted to stop the exhibition. Another official yelled to secure the deck. 2 guards ran toward Tobin instead of the possessed champion. He grabbed the nearest tomato crate and slammed it in their path. No, he said. Danger is on stage. They looked at his zero magic wrist stamp and hesitated. Valyriia leaned toward them. They chose wisdom and stopped. The champion's body twisted. Black cables shot from the gear in his chest and lashed toward Leia. Leia drew the dog card. The wooden dog burst out, barked like a chair scraping, and bit one cable in half. Bolt would have hated it. The crowd loved it for half a second. Then a second cable hit the platform near a child who had crawled too close to see. The black ear cracked loose from the champion and skittered across the boards toward the child like a metal spider. Nell screamed the child's name. Rel moved before anyone else. The little doll jumped from the crate, its spoon raised and landed between the crawling gear and the child. The gear opened like a mouth. Rel jammed the wooden spoon inside it. The spoon blackened. Rel's stitched shield mark flared silver. He ran. Valyriia was faster, but she had to stay small. He did not. Being zero magic is very freeing. When everyone already expects nothing, he reached the platform, grabbed the tomato crate with both hands and dropped it over the crawling black gear. It hit the crate from inside once, twice. Then Valyriia stepped on the lid gently for her. The crate flattened, the gear cracked. Black smoke hissed out and tried to form teeth. Leia drew the drain card and slapped it against the boards. The smoke dragged into a bead. The champion was still hanging from the black cables, alive but bent backward, and the gear stump in his chest tried to regrow teeth. Tobin drew 1 card, then stopped and looked at Leia. That mattered. A father with power let the daughter on stage make the call. Leia. She drew the glow card. Warm light wrapped the champion's ribs, holding them in place. He screamed once, then gasped for air like a man pulled back from a deadly cliff. Exits cleared out. Valyriia leaned close to him. The card saves an enemy witness, she whispered, but he noted they were both victims. She watched Leia hold the glow steady, refusing to argue. Her pride took a small blow. Then the clown card popped out. It kicked the bead high and smacked it with a pie made of pure sunlight. The bead exploded into harmless glitter, leaving the stunned crowd completely silent. Rel bowed back with a blackened spoon, and the crowd absolutely lost its mind. That reaction changed everything because the crowd was finally shifting sides. Earlier they wanted the deck locked up, now they saw it protect Illa. It saved her. Rel shielded a child, and the dark gear crawled out. The dark gear crawled out of a trusted champion in broad daylight. The Silverblade Guild champion collapsed, his armor split open and his power gone. He looked up from the floor, whispering the legendary title, Card Master. Tobin flinched at the words, but Leia stood tall and stepped forward. She threw a shield between them, warning that no farm gifts belong near civilians. The crowd heard her warning clearly, and so did every official in attendance. That message hit everyone who wanted to steal the deck under the guise of safety. This rule was no dry document. It was a living child saved from disaster. The city accepted it because the terrifying alternative had just crawled across the stage. Desperate to save face, one official tried to make it sound like his idea. He announced a temporary supervised deployment, but Rel just pointed that blackened spoon. The creature aimed the spoon directly at the crushed crate where the gear once lay. The official swallowed hard under Miss Gree's safety rule, while Leia stood unsmiling. The crowd respected her silence. People trust power that does not beg for admiration. Tobin looked caught between tears and arguing over his daughter's new title. Instead, he proudly stood behind his daughter, letting everyone see who held the deck. And that was how their guild was truly born, not by paperwork, but action. A proud father stepped back as the whole city watched a young girl protect a defenseless child. By sunset, the Grekar Guild had built a real platform, not just some fancy palace. Their shelter now had real guards standing watch, instead of just extorting money. The rival Tusk crew fled so fast, they scraped their own stamps off the doors. He should have felt relieved. Instead, he was just incredibly hungry. Valyriia watched Leela answer questions from a ring of nervous fighters and frowned. She muttered that Leela was getting more attention than the one who crushed the gear. He replied that he could stay hidden while still being properly appreciated. Valyriia smirked, pointing out that is not usually how being hidden works. Nell approached holding out the torn doll he had repaired, then hesitated nervously. He raised his hands reassuringly, telling her the doll belonged with her. Rel saluted with the spoon. Valyriia warned that if it bit her, she would burn it. Rel slowly lowered the spoon, good instincts. Suddenly the western gate exploded inward, shattered not by magic but heavy bolts. His scorched mechanical dog burst through the thick smoke, carrying an unconscious woman. The entire arena fell dead silent, starting with the crowd and the fighters. And then there was Tobin. The woman on Bolt's back wore shredded white armor, her sword arm. Hung wrong, blood matted her hair to her face, a broken silver badge was still pinned to her shoulder. One Silverblade Guild fighter whispered. Korev, another, dropped to his knees, the sword. Saint Bolt limped to him, lowered himself, and let the strongest swordswoman alive slide into his arms, like someone had snapped her title in. Half her sword was gone. That terrified the Silverblade Guild fighters more than the blood. Valyriia looked toward the road Bolt had torn through, and for once she did not joke about another woman arriving at his feet. That scared him more than the sword. Cora opened one eye. "Do not," she whispered. "Let the axe follow me." Then she passed out, the strongest swordswoman alive. Woke up in his guest room, asking where the battlefield was. Valyriia Thorn stood at the foot of the bed, holding his blue mug, asking why. Another woman was bleeding all over her blanket. That was how the next disaster started. Nobody argued. That alone worried him. Cora tried to sit up. Her sword arm buckled wrong. Her white armor was slashed open from shoulder to hip. One silver badge still clung to the strap, like pride itself refusing to evacuate. Bolt sat by the door with muddy paws, pretending he had not broken Stonebridge City's western gate to bring her back. Cora looked at him. Then at him. How far did it follow? Far enough that his dog considered city property completely optional. Her eyes sharpened. Then move me outside, if the axe reaches your house it will split the foundation just to hear the scream. Valyriia lifted one eyebrow, calling it dramatic. Cora turned her head, finally seeing Valyriia clearly. For half a second the sword saint forgot her broken ribs. Then she tried to reach for a weapon, but she had no sword. That terrified her more than Valyriia. "The Thorn Queen," Cora whispered. Valyriia smiled over the rim of the mug. "The bleeding woman recognizes me. Good, that makes one competent guest. She is not a guest," he said. Valyriia looked at the blanket. "She is under my blanket." "It is my blanket. It is on my couch. Sometimes it has defected." Cora stared between them, as if the world had cracked in a more painful way than her arm. That was when a piece of wood fell from Bolt's shoulder seam, hitting the floor. Just a splinter, brown and ragged, probably from the arena gate or his porch rail. Cora saw it and went still, asking if she could. He picked it up, placing it in her good hand. Cora drew a broken shard of silver from inside her boot. It was all that remained of her sword, 3 inches of sacred edge, cracked near the hilt and humming. Like a trapped mosquito, she pressed the blade to the tough wood splinter. The silver chipped, but the wood did not. Outside the open window, 2 Silverblade fighters who had followed Bolt from the city watched the test. One of them had a ceremonial dagger at his belt. He pulled it halfway out, looked at the wood splinter, and pushed the dagger back as if it had embarrassed his family. Cora saw that. 2. A title can survive blood, but not a porch chip that humiliates everyone's steel. Cora's face fell, and Valyriia stopped drinking. Cora tried again, slower. The wood splinter shaved a curl from the sacred steel as if it were whittling kindling. The room went quiet enough for Atlas to ruin it. From the umbrella bucket, the prophecy sword spoke up, saying, "Warning everyone that storage like this is unnatural." Cora stared at him with The deep fear experts feel when the smallest thing in the room beats their life's work. When asked what technique made the wood, he mentioned portraiture. What? School, carpentry. She squeezed her fist around the splinter, demanding he teach her his carpentry before the axe arrived. That was the first bad sign. The sword saint had not even been awake for 3 minutes, and she already wanted the secret of a wood chip. Cora tried to swing her legs off the bed, but Valyriia pushed one finger against her forehead and pressed her back down. Cora's eyes flashed as Valyriia warned that if she bled on the floor, the farmer would fuss, and she found his fussing tedious. She must return to her guild, adding that if the Silverblade Guild depended on Cora crawling back with one arm, it deserved absolute embarrassment. Cora's jaw tightened. There was an ugly, simple rule. If Cora returned broken, Silverblade's reputation shattered with her. If the axe followed her here, Havanaker got dragged into whatever had snapped the strongest formal sword in the north. The farmer did not want either, doing what he could to help. He fed her. Cora stared at the bowl of rice, eggs, and chopped greens, as if it were a deadly weapon disguised as breakfast. Valyriia leaned against the bedpost. Eat, she said. It would either heal or insult her. That was not comforting. Cora grumbled. It is accurate, the farmer replied. Cora took one bite. Her broken arm snapped straight. A scream. She dropped her spoon. Valyriia caught her shoulder before she could bolt. Bolt barked once, and the bed frame suddenly sprouted 4 wooden braces around Cora's legs to keep her from falling. Talk about magic. Cora stared at them in shock. He stared harder. Bed, he muttered. No improvising without permission. The braces instantly froze. Cora's breathing shook as color returned to her face, but dark black lines remained under the skin at her wrist. Tiny tooth marks like the black ear had kissed her bones and left deep dents behind. Valyriia saw them. Her expression lost its petty edge. Power now, she muttered. Cora swallowed hard. Soul later. No lecture was needed. She lifted the splinter, explaining the axe cut through her sword because it tried to dominate the weapon. This wood resisted by doing nothing. That sounded like wood and like a secret. She pointed at his shelf with the broken silver shard, asking what forms he practiced. He only stretched after chores. Valyria's mouth curved. He calls everything that humiliates experts a mere chore. Cora did not laugh, demanding to see. Before he could refuse, the fence screamed, not the monster defensive line, but the fence. A cracking sound swept across the field, in sharp wooden cracks, as if something were testing the fence posts for honesty. Bolt's ears flattened. Valyriia set her mug down. Cora shoved herself up the wooden braces, splintering away. She warned them that the deadly axe had arrived, floating through the defensive monster guards without even rushing. The first beast lowered its head to Valyria's powerful aura, trying to block the paths. The axe split it cleanly, continuing to float. Honestly, its small size made it more terrifying. Even worse, featuring a plain iron head, dark handle, and black gear roots wrapped around its throat like a collar. Every time it moved, the grass leaned away in fear. Every stump in the yard bled black sap. The Silverblade fighters who had followed Bolt from the city stopped at the broken gate. One of them raised a spear. Cora screamed not to strike it. Too late, the spear hit the axe head. In a single breath, the spear aged a century. It rusted to powder, gone. It fell right through the fighter's fingers. He collapsed. The axe turned. It aimed for the porch. Atlas rattled inside the umbrella bucket, a rude tool. Worse manners than his, clearly. Valyriia raised her hand. Dark fire gathered. He stepped in. No, he stood right in front of her. The whole yard stared, even the axe. Valyriia warned him that the thing was corrupted. Rel was cloth with teeth. This a pure murder tool. He insisted it was just an axe. It broke the sword saint. And now it followed her to his woodpile. Cora staggered, clutching her wounded ribs. She urged him to make an insulting plan fast, but he had absolutely nothing. No plan, but as the axe turned, he finally caught a glimpse of the handle. He saw a crooked burn mark near the grip, a tiny memory of a cold winter. He had leaned his axe too close to the stove, later wrapping it with twine. The rough burn blistered his palm. His hand remembered before his brain did. Mabel, he called. The axe froze. Valyriia stared. You actually named an axe. He was lonely, a classic excuse, right? Even Atlas let out a strangled sound. Well, he used her more. The black roots on the weapon snapped incredibly tight. A sharp, high-pitched scream filled the air, not from Cora but the axe. Every log in the pile split open in pure panic. Cora whispered in shock. That name struck deeper than her sword. The axe shot forward. He held out his hand. No, he yelled. Bolt crashed hard, digging deep furrows into the ground, but stopped. Mabel's blade stopped just an inch from his chest. The cold stiffened his shirt. He could have stepped back. Honestly, he should have. Instead, he reached out. He touched the handle. Black roots bit his palm. Valyriia moved. He said no burning. She halted instantly. The sheer effort cracked the heavy porch boards under her feet. He wrapped his fingers around the twine grip. The axe thrashed like a wild beast. A sensory memory flooded his hands. Cold, rainy mornings spent splitting firewood before sunrise. He remembered tossing Mabel aside when Atlas first fell into his quiet yard. The system had screamed that real heroes do not use farm tools. He forgot. He had forgotten for years, but Mabel had not. He whispered a soft apology. The blade twitched toward his throat, so he dragged her to the chopping block. Cora stared. What was he doing? Just what she knows, he quietly replied. He set one log upright. Mabel yanked, desperate to destroy something important. Instead, he gave her firewood. The very first chop split the log clean. Dark, toxic sap sprayed from the blade. The tight roots finally loosened up. Valyriia came closer, surprised it worked. He told her not to sound shocked. His cowardice always becomes a strategy, she noted. Same, the axe shook. He set another log. Mabel slammed down harder, the split echoing loudly. The beastly guards lowered their heads. The elite silver blade fighters just stared. They watched as if he had just conquered a battlefield with household chores. Cora held the splinter close. She was not even attacking to win. She wanted recognition, a real job. He silently set up the third log. Mabel hesitated, then dropped on her own. It split. The dark collar cracked. A tiny bead of black metal popped out, skittering across the wooden porch. Valyriia instantly crushed it. A sharp crack, then smoke. Mabel went limp. The weapon lay dead in his hands. The heavy head shrank to plain iron. The roots fell away like dead string. The handle warmed, not quite alive, but familiar. A rough, bark-like voice spoke from the blade, saying you picked the shiny one. Atlas shot upright in the umbrella bucket, declaring he is a sacred weapon. Mabel's blade tilted toward him, shiny. The silver blade fighters made a noise he would never forget, the sound of professional warriors realizing their guild crisis had devolved into a family argument between weapons. Cora slowly dropped to one knee, not to him nor to Valyriia, but to the axe. The North called it burial. Axe, she said. She lost her sword to an abandoned farm tool with hurt feelings. Mabel hummed smugly. Valyriia stared right at him, telling him he would not be allowed to name kitchen items anymore because the kettle already had opinions. He promised to destroy that kettle. Right on cue, it whistled from inside the house, breaking the tension just enough for Cora to laugh, then hiss in pain. Still, the laugh mattered. It put breath back in her, but those crawling black marks under her skin were still there. Cora held up the farm splinter, asking him to show her the movement he mentioned. Could stretch, so he went inside and grabbed an old Tacha pamphlet from the shelf, returning to the yard where two guild fighters, a demon queen, a prophecy sword, a recovered axe, a mechanical dog, and half a monster fence watched him unfold the Tacha pamphlet. Valyriia read the title with narrowed eyes, calling it a children's exercise sheet with simple diagrams. Still, Cora took it like holy scripture. No, he said, just borrow it instead of stealing. Atlas muttered that he was chosen while the pamphlet was merely stored. Cora ignored them, demanding he show the first diagram. He raised his hands. Nothing happened. One silverblade fighter sighed in disappointment. Then he shifted his weight. The farm went quiet, not silent like Valyria's spell, but quiet like a field before seeds break. The dust around his boots lifted in a circle. The split logs rolled upright, and the laundry line straightened itself. The black marks under Cora's skin stopped crawling. He turned his waist and pushed the air. The entire yard shifted an inch without actually moving. That was the best way to describe it. The fence stayed put, but the thread around it slid aside. The porch stayed crooked, yet every nail knew exactly where it belonged. Even the monster guards at the road shifted their feet into neat rows, looking as if caught slouching. Cora's mouth parted. Valyriia stepped into the motion, her aura hitting the circle around him without crushing it. Instead, it folded and gold threads ran through the dark shadow on her shoulders. The mud under her boots sprouted tiny red flowers that seemed to immediately regret looking so cute. Under her, Valyriia glanced down at them, then at him. For once, she did not look like she wanted to kill the problem. She looked like the problem had opened a door without inviting her. Do it again, she ordered. Cora copied the first motion with her broken arm. The farm splinter in her hand glowed warm brown. The black tooth marks under her wrist peeled loose thread by thread, dropping like a dry Little gear root onto the grass. Mabel chopped it before anyone could even tell her to. Cora gasped as her shoulders settled. Her stance changed. She was not healed. Completely, it was redirected. The Silverblade fighters dropped to one knee so fast their armor clanged. Cora looked down, finally. Shedding her shame, she gripped the farm splinter like a true blade and performed. He went through the first Tai-Kai motion again, and the wind bent right around him. A clean cut opened in the air, slowly parting a drifting leaf without touching its stem. Cora whispered that Silver Blaine had only been teaching people to strike harder. Ethan folded the pamphlet, thinking that sounded like a sword guild tactic when they needed control. They needed to learn when not to strike. Valyriia gave Cora a very sharp look. She warned her not to make him sound wise, but Ethan just grumbled that he was hungry. Right at that moment, a glowing card bird slammed directly into his kitchen window. It was made of 3 small paper cards, a green glow, and Leia's pure panic. It slid down the glass, flapping upside down until Bolt opened the door with his nose. The paper bird landed in Tobin's empty mug and burst into Leia's frantic voice. She warned Ethan that her dad said not to worry, which meant they should absolutely worry. Ashgrove Forest had sent envoys demanding the true deck, promising they could return Tobin's wife. Then Leia's voice cut in again, sounding much smaller, saying they only needed the deck. Cora's new stance vanished instantly, while Valyria's flowers burned pitch black under her boots. Ethan stared at the empty mug, the axe, and the pamphlet in Cora's hand. The cardboard bird was already folding itself, dissolving quietly into black ashes. Ashgrove had demanded the deck, but Tobin had already heard the one offer he could not refuse. They knew how to bait a desperate man. Ashgrove Forest welcomed Tobin with a bargain. That funeral arch alone was how Ethan knew this place was going to be serious trouble. A real family welcome usually had loud shouting or someone pretending not to shed a tear. Ashgrove had green lanterns, silent elves, and a sacred tree standing in the mist. Inside the bark, a woman's sleeping face was sealed. Seeing this, Tobin stopped dead. Leia grabbed his sleeve with both hands, staring at the face that shared her exact mouth. Ethan did not need a family history lecture to understand the grief driving this man. To him, the rest of the world had completely vanished. Meanwhile, the root speaker at the arch bowed deeply to Leia, ignoring Tobin, and promised that her mother could be restored. Tobin's hand drifted to the true deck at his belt, as Valyria's hand hovered dangerously near his throat, fully prepared to stop him if he acted foolishly. Cora stood on Ethan's other side, with a wooden splinter tucked behind her cracked armor. When she whispered that this place smelled wrong, Ethan said it smelled like metal teeth. That grim joke died quickly, as the rules were absolute. If the deck touched the wrong roots, it would either save a family or drain a race. If black gear controlled the sacred tree, every elf here became a living battery with pretty leaves. The root speaker kept smiling, acting as if he did not notice the trap. Hanging right over his head, suddenly, a line of Ashgrove guards stepped up behind them with leaf-bladed spears. They did not point the weapons at Valyriia, but aimed them directly at Tobin, showing Ethan that the whole welcome was a setup. The human husband was allowed to grieve but not allowed to decide. Since Leia was half-elf, they just smiled at her. Tobin was only useful because his hands held the true deck at his belt. When an old guard tried to touch it, Tobin grabbed his wrist. The guard went rigid, but Leia quickly stepped between them before anyone started to bleed, defending her father. The root speaker's soft smile remained as he spoke of love. He claimed tree love preserves. Valyriia scoffed softly, prompting Cora to lean toward Ethan. She whispered that if Valyriia laughed again, he should duck. The guard stared at her, warning that no shadow should cross the circle. Valyria's hand opened as she stepped forward. They were talking, but she grumbled about being insulted by mere shrubbery. The lanterns overhead flickered as the wooden woman opened one eye wider. Tobin saw that and almost forgot the spears, insults, and all of Ethan's warnings. That was why the trap worked. It did not need fools, just desperate people who were missing someone. Tobin desperately pleaded for the deck, but Ethan flatly said no. Tobin flinched as if slapped, while Leia looked at Ethan with tearful eyes. He refused to surrender it blindly and pointed at the woman in the bark. He demanded to see the cost, but the forest answered before the speaker could. Thick vines shot from the dirt, binding Leia's ankles as Tobin lunged forward. Cora sliced a vine with her farm splinter, making it recoil without bleeding. That action spoke volumes to the watching elves. Their sacred root had flinched. Valyriia raised black fire in her hand, while the aggressive vines tightened. They wrapped tightly around Illa's legs, prompting a young elven guard to break rank. He swung his knife to free Illa, but the aggressive vines snapped up his arm. His green cloak withered to gray, his cheeks hollowed, and his knife slipped away. The blade withered into a leaf before landing, yet the other guards refused to help. They only stared at the root speaker. That reaction was the ugliest proof. These guards actually feared the tree they served. Ethan quickly threw his canteen. He aimed right at Leia's bindings. Farm water splashed over the roots, releasing steam. The grip loosened, giving Leia just enough time to pull her foot free and grab a card. She slid it halfway out of her sleeve, then hesitated, looking at Ethan in pain. She asked for targets. Even with roots drinking her blood, she remembered. Ethan told her to only target civilian roots, and she played her dog card. A wooden beast materialized, barking with a harsh, scraping sound, and bit the vine. The young guard fell back shaking but alive, staring at Leia in absolute disbelief. His prisoner had just saved him from the very religion he served. Faces appeared under the bark, not carvings but pressed faces of elves with closed eyes, mouths full of leaves, and pale green skin. Ethan grabbed Valyria's wrist. He urged her not to burn it. Her eyes snapped to him, arguing it touched the girl. Ethan warned it was full of people. She coldly countered that it shouldn't be so flammable. The root speaker's smug smile cracked. Good, Ethan liked him less when he was comfortable. Tobin drew the deck with shaking hands, hoping for his wife, but Cora warned it was bait. Tobin's face hardened, asking how she knew. Cora bluntly admitted she simply knew trap bait. She had lost her own sword to a trap yesterday. Leia looked at her father through pain. She begged him to ask first, showing the gift rule working even under heavy family pressure. Tobin raised the deck but held on, desperately demanding to know if she could speak. The woman in the bark opened one eye, and the entire forest seemed to lean inward. The real deck grew warm, and the archer card pressed hard from inside. It was trying to turn toward the tree. Tobin saw this and completely broke. He stepped closer. The roots moved faster than grief, snapping tightly around his wrist. They tore the case free and dragged the real deck straight into the tree bark. Every green lantern in Ashgrove went black, and Valyria's remaining patience died. She blasted the nearest root with a thin stream of fire, avoiding the trapped souls. But it was enough to make it scream and drop Leia. Suddenly, the ground beneath Ethan opened. He fell through leaves, dirt, and a deeply personal amount of humiliation before landing. He slid sideways down wet roots, landing knee-deep in a dark hollow under the forest. Above him, Valyriia shouted his name. It was not comforting. Valyriia shouting his name usually meant some poor creature was about to be punished for. Simply having ears, a plant bigger than his pantry snapped at his leg. The teeth, it had way too many. The beginner system flashed in his face. Warning of predatory flora, suggesting a combat stance. Instead, he just threw a handful of fertilizer straight into the plant's mouth. It froze, then it spat his boot out, wrapping every vine around the fertilizer sack, making a noise like a cow finding religion. Fine, he told it, you keep the bag, do not eat the leg. The plant dragged the sack away, opening a path through the roots like it had just accepted a bribe. Apparently, Ashgrove diplomacy had come to this. Fertilizer beat his thigh as a meal option. He crawled through the narrow gap before it could reconsider. The root tunnel narrowed, and black gear marks pulsed under. Bark each biting into a sleeping face. He heard Illa shouting above him. And Tobin shouting, then a deck of cards snapping like wild wings in a storm. A root slapped across the tunnel. He pulled the farm chainsaw from his pack. It was a bad idea to bring a chainsaw to a sacred forest. It was a worse idea not to. The chainsaw coughed once before he pulled the cord, then started all by itself. Easy, he told it. The blade clicked like teeth trying to be polite. The first root lunged. He cut it, not the sleeping face, nor the green vein under it, just the black metal thread wrapped around it. The root went slack in the sleeping elf inside the bark took one clean breath. That was enough proof for him. He cut the next thread as the chainsaw purred. Some tools enjoy their work too much. By the time he reached the root chamber, his sleeves were torn and his boots were full of sap, and the chainsaw was acting smug. Behind him, the bribed plant followed, hugging the fertilizer sack under 3 vines. It spat one root out of his path, then another. Then it snapped aggressively at a black beetle crawling under. The bark chewed once and recoiled like it bit a nail. Bad flavor, he asked. The plant actually nodded. He did not enjoy how many farm-adjacent objects had started understanding questions. The chainsaw growled at the beetle. The beetle tried to run, but the plant pinned it with one vine and looked at him like it had brought a mouse to the door. so he cut the black ear thread holding the beetle to the root and it crumbled into ash. The plant patted the fertilizer sac and opened a wider tunnel, a bizarre alliance, but it worked. He fed it and it decided his enemies tasted worse. The sacred tree's heart was hollow. Valyriia, Korra, Tobin, and Leia stood on a circle of roots around it. Black pool, the true deck floated over the water, open like a book. Cards spun around it, but the pictures were wrong. The shield card had teeth. The beast card had roots for legs. The clown card actually stood right on the water without smiling, which was honestly the most disturbing thing it had ever done. And behind the deck stood a man-shaped copy wearing Malik Crow's face like a mask, printed from old grief. The moment Valyriia saw him, she went completely still, whispering Malrich Crow. The copy bowed, enough of him to remember worship, but not enough to die when they killed the first pieces. He had no idea how many pieces that meant, but he knew the roots behind the copy were leaning toward Valyriia like starving snakes. Korra lifts her farm splinter. The Malik copy smirks. Silverblade had only sent him just one saint, while half an acre sends a mere farmer with fertilizer. Good summary, the farmer replies. Give the deck back, the copy laughs, but the deck answers him, summoning a massive barn door. Shield that slams down, blocking Tobin. Then a massive root boar bursts from the water. It charges straight at Leia, but Korra steps into the martial motion she learned just this morning. Parrying the wild beast's tusks with her simple farm splinter, the giant boar crashes heavily into a root wall, exploding into blank card scraps. Leia stares, but Korra just tells her later. Valyriia makes a move for the deck. Instantly, the Malik copy flips a card, summoning a queen-shaped shadow that rises from the dark pool, wearing Valyria's outline poorly, like a thief in oversized armor. Black fire clings to its hands, and a twisted false crown sprouts from its head. The false crown grows from its brow, yet Valyria's face does not even flicker. Suddenly, the ground around her feet turns to glass. The copy queen arrogantly lifts its chin. Shadow Queen replicates. Valyriia steps forward, but the dark shadow strikes first. That black fire hits Valyria's palm and bends backward, cracking the false crown instantly. The shadow staggers like a child trying to swing a heavy warhammer. Valyriia leans in close. She warns it not to borrow her face, then delivers a devastating, raw slap. No magic, just a physical smack. The loud crack echoes as the copy queen flies backward. Crashing hard into the wooden wall, she sinks halfway into the bark. Every trapped elf flinches. The farmer grabs Valyria's sleeve before she can completely obliterate the clone. Her eyes burn with rage as he reminds her the tree is still full of innocent people. She claims she knows, though she looks ready to commit a highly precise murder. Korra, bleeding again, chuckles. She notes how their rules seem to travel quite well. The Malik copy stops laughing, staring nervously at his deck and then at the farmer. That is when the copy's extreme arrogance makes him slip up. Deciding the queen was too crude, he boasts that he will simply copy the source instead. The deck spins toward the farmer. Tobin screams as Leia draws. She freezes, unable to tell where the trapped civilians end and the tree souls begin. Smart move, watch closely now, as the deck flashes white and the copy spreads his arms. He commands it to replicate the creator. For one tense breath, absolutely nothing happens. Then the entire deck goes completely blank. No shield, no beast, no archer remains. Only white cards, as empty as winter fields. The entire root chamber groans and chokes. Instantly, the copy queen dissolves, and the boar scraps fall flat. The giant shield breaks into harmless paper, while the blank clown card somehow looks offended. Staggering backward, the shocked Malik copy retreats from his empty deck. Impossible, Valyriia silently stares at the blank cards as Korra looks from the farmer to her splinter, then back to the empty deck. He feels far from powerful. Instead, he feels like a bystander who watched a heavy wagon stop only because the horse ignored him. But honestly, watching the copy's horrified reaction right now is highly satisfying. This monster wearing Malik's face had stolen a sacred tree and drained a royal bloodline. He even baited a desperate father with his wife and poorly copied a demon queen. But the moment he tried copying a simple farmer, his entire prize shattered. Leia moves first, sprinting across the root circle to slap both hands onto the deck. Demanding she ask, the farmer yells. Hearing his shout, she freezes mid-motion. As roots lunge for her wrists, she frantically asks if she can take it back. The cards flash green, and a wooden dog card appears, biting down hard. Roots immediately. The clown card reappeared just long enough to hurl a pie into the dark pool. Meanwhile, the shield card snapped over Tobin and Leia as Korra cleared a path. Through gear threads above the chamber, the root speaker screamed out that the forest held the right to blood property. Leia looked up through a crack in the roots. Her expression shifted, not healed nor calm. Decided, my blood is not your property, she declared. The true deck pulsed in her hands. That simple line did not shatter the tree, it shattered the room's permission structure instead. Above, two guards dropped their spears. The young elf she rescued crawled away from the dangerous root circle rather than returning to formation. The root speaker saw them move and screamed to slaughter traitors. Valyriia smiled. Her smile had teeth, even without showing them. The Maori copy hissed. Valyriia grabbed him by the throat. This time nobody stopped her. She did not burn him, she lifted him high enough that every root in the chamber strained toward his boots. You built toys in my shape, she said. The copy's smile twitched. He looked scared. Now that felt much better. A black root opened behind his spine, before Valyriia crushed his throat. A pulse shot from his back into the root. It carried a single image clear enough to feel in the teeth. Valyria's face, alive and here. The pulse vanished into the tree. Valyria's hands snapped shut. The Maori copy shattered into dry bark. No blood, no body, just bark and one black seed that tried to crawl away. Since Mabel was not there, Cora handled it. She stepped forward slowly, turned her wrist as the pamphlet instructed, and sliced the seed in half with the farm splinter. The Silverblade path had officially become completely embarrassing. Then the sacred tree revealed the horrific cost. A shard of glassy bark fell into the black pool. Valyriia caught it before it sank. The chamber suddenly filled with a short, cruel memory. Ashgrove elders pressing hands to the tree. Black gear marks bloomed under their palms. The sleeping elves were fed into the roots, one family at a time, while the woman in the bark stayed just out of reach. The root speaker had not been tricked by a single bad root. He simply bought hope with other people's lives. The memory shattered. Above, the root speaker screamed as the sacred tree split from crown to root. All the green lanterns died inside the trunk. Hundreds of elves hung in pale seed pods, breathing shallowly, drained, almost completely empty. The woman in the bark had vanished from sight. But the archer card in Leia's deck glowed once, then went quiet. Leia held the deck tightly to her chest, sobbing silently. Tobin wrapped an arm around her and stared at the dead tree like he had been offered his wife twice and robbed. Both times, Valyriia stared at the split roots while Cora watched the black pulse trail. The gardener stared at fertilizer-stained hands. They had the deck back. The copy had failed. You would think this was a win, but the sacred tree lay dead. Ashgrove's people were completely drained, and somewhere far beyond those black roots, Maori Crow had just learned Valyriia Thorn was alive. Valyriia Thorn could kill Ashgrove Forest, but she could not easily revive it. That difference nearly got everyone burned. The sacred tree stood split open from root to crown, hollow as an empty cathedral. Pale elves hung in seed pods inside the trunk. Some breathed, while others merely twitched as black gear threads tightened around their ribs. Meanwhile, the root speaker crawled away from the black pool. Her arm turned gray. Valyriia raised her hand, black fire gathering around it. It formed a thin, perfect blade. Cora stepped forward, holding a simple farm splinter. She gripped it tight. It was either bravery or madness, and he was still learning. Valyria's eyes narrowed, commanding her to move out of the way. Cora's voice shook, but she stood firm, warning that burning the gear kills the bodies. Leaving them means they die slowly, but Cora refused to let her end them faster. The captive root speaker laughed from the floor, mocking the Thorn Queen's mercy. Valyriia instantly turned her flames toward him, but the farmer stepped in. He pinned the man's sleeve down with his boot before he could crawl away. He ordered the tree kidnapper to stay quiet. The captive glared at his boot. To the villain, this was a massive insult, and it was about time. The situation was grim. If the sacred tree stayed dead, the grove would collapse. Every trapped soul would perish. If Valyriia forced a resurrection with her dark power, she would bring back corrupted bodies with black teeth biting within. They needed a farmer's gentle solution, but Valyriia was determined to try. Avoiding her usual destructive flames, she pressed 2 fingers against a seed pod. She carefully drew one thin black strand out of the sleeping elf inside. The pod opened briefly and the elf sat up, but then his eyes clicked. Tiny gear teeth unfolded inside his eyes as he clawed toward the deck. The guard screamed that he was alive, but Valyriia coldly cut him off. She closed her fist, sealing the pod before the dark gears could take hold. The guard angrily accused her of burying him, but Valyriia stared him down. Her freezing gaze made the man lose all courage. Then Cora stepped forward. She used her farm splinter to cut a single thread along the pod's edge. The elf took a normal breath, making the guard drop his anger and spear. It was undeniable proof. Valyriia could force things open, but corruption would follow. Cora could carefully free them one by one, but hundreds of pods remained. The forest needed a real cure, not a force that enslaved the dead. Unfortunately, he was just a farmer. Cora took the lead, raising her splinter. She took a steady breath, following the manual, and slowly turned her wrist. A clean line opened in the air, not a slash but a perfect gap. The dark thread around the pod parted cleanly, without harming the elf inside. As the elf coughed, every elite fighter in the room watched in disbelief. Someone whispered she was a saint, but Cora ignored them and kept cutting. Another thread cut, and the next elf gasped, weeping sap as life returned. The truth was undeniable. The broken sword saint had found an impossible path. A way no ordinary weapon could follow. Valyriia slowly lowered her dark flames. Cora's hand trembled as the dark marks on her wrist crept back, but he reached out. Placing his hand over hers, he guided her through the movements to settle the mark. The black mark stopped. Cora glared at him, warning him not to make it look easy. Her confusion was growing, but there was no time. Leia climbed forward with the deck. She held it tight, with Tobin keeping a protective arm around her shoulders. He held 3 blank cards that were slowly beginning to remember their pictures. Suddenly, the archer card pulsed inside the deck, making Leia freeze in shock. She softly whispered for her mother, but the card remained silent for now. The root speaker reached for the glowing deck, but hope had taught them caution. Valyriia pinned his hand to the floor with a sharp, black nail of magic, stopping him instantly. He screamed in pain as she smiled down, calling it an act of restraint. The main character agreed, hating restraint as the old guards shuffled around the circle. Half of them looked ready to kneel to Leia, while the others pretended to be innocent. They wanted to act like decoration this whole time, but Leia saw right through them. She lifted the card deck. Every guard flinched, but she did not draw. She warned them strictly not to use farm gifts near civilians without asking. Her voice cracked slightly, somehow making her warning sound even more powerful. She was terrified, grieving, and furious, but she still firmly held the line. The young elf she saved dropped his spear, prompting another guard to do the same. The root speaker snarled that Ashgrove would never obey a half-blood child. Suddenly, Tobin moved, surprisingly fast for someone who had been emotionally destroyed. He quickly stepped between the root speaker and Leia to protect her. Tobin drew his shield card, slamming down a massive barrier with a loud boom. The root speaker's angry words hit the shield and bounced straight back. A clown card appeared above, shaking its head like a disappointed teacher. Even Valyriia looked slightly offended on behalf of the defeated villain. Leia took a breath and looked at him, silently asking if they could save them. Can they save everyone? Valyriia could destroy the corruption, but at what cost? Cora could keep cutting threads, but she would eventually collapse from exhaustion. They had to save Ashgrove without turning their power into a tyrant's throne. He did not want Valyriia becoming a wildfire or himself a force system hero. He stared down at the dead, empty soil surrounding the sacred tree. It smelled sour and dry, reminding him of a soul-crushing office carpet after midnight. It was a bizarre, stupid memory to have in a magical forest of elf pods. But old lives return at the worst moments. Suddenly, the beginner system flashed. It warned him of a highly vulnerable corruption source. Promising 10,000 hero points, the screen urged him to purify it. He dismissed it, but it returned, insisting he command the allied forces. He closed it again, but it demanded he accept the hero route. Frustrated, he shoved his hand through the screen and grabbed a small twig. He had snapped it off earlier because farmers trust cuttings over promises. The tiny apple twig had only 2 leaves and no right to be important. Valyriia scoffed, warning him that this would only make everyone more nervous. She meant it was impossible, an insult to every ancient, terrifying tree. But dead soil cannot be picky. Meanwhile, Cora stared intently at the twig. When she asked if that was his answer, he joked his standards were low. Tobin let out a strained chuckle, but Leia remained completely serious. The archer card pulsed in Leia's hands, still pointing toward the dead trunk. It acted like a compass pointing straight toward grief. He hesitated for a second. In his past life, he spent years making other people rich and powerful. But when the system handed him a sword in this new world, he refused. He chose seeds instead, a peaceful future that required 0 bloodshed. With that, he knelt directly onto the dead, sacred ground. He dug through the soil with his hands. The root speaker laughed again, mocking the simple farm cutting. He tossed a handful of fertilizer into the hole. Instantly, the root speaker's laughter cut short. The bribed carnivorous plant from the tunnel poked a single vine through a nearby crack. It spotted the fertilizer and leaned forward with intense, deeply personal interest. "Not yours," he muttered, "and trust me, that plant looked personally insulted." Chaos takes many shapes, and sometimes it is a carnivorous plant trying to steal a resurrection. He planted the twig, nothing happened, the worst second of his day. The root speaker sneered through his broken teeth as a few Ashgrove guards turned away. Valyriia stepped closer, no longer mocking. She addressed him directly as farmer. "No," he muttered, pouring the last of his farm water over the twig. Still nothing. Leia stepped forward. Tobin tried to hold her back, but she shook him off and placed her card. She placed the archer card beside the twig and whispered to ask. The card flashed green. A woman's voice drifted out, thin as a bowstring and sharp with unshed tears. She whispered to plant deeper, because Tobin always plants too shallow when upset. Tobin collapsed, not fainted, collapsed the way a man does when hope hits harder than despair. Leia covered her mouth in shock. On the card, the archer opened her painted eyes. "Nadia," Tobin whispered. That was the first time her name entered this tale. She was no longer just an absence. Nadia Grill looked out from a tiny palm-sized card. Her gaze somehow forced every guard in Ashgrove to slowly lower their weapons. Turning toward the farmer, she warned that the dead root was stealing his water. He had no idea how to make a root feel ashamed, so he just planted it deeper. The sharp twig split his palm, driving itself deep as the dry ground drank his blood. It swallowed the water and fertilizer instantly. Then, the entire Ashgrove forest inhaled. Every dead lantern flared a brilliant green. The sacred tree did not use the old trunk. That would have been far too simple. Instead, the Havanacker twig shot straight through it. A pale, ordinary trunk burst out of the dead core, pausing for just one heartbeat. Then roots exploded outward like opening hands, wrapping tightly around the nearby seed pods. The roots squeezed, the pods popped, and elves spilled out of the blossoming flowers. It was not graceful. One fully armored warrior fell headfirst into the thick mud. He yelled a curse that the farmer had never heard but understood instantly. An elderly elf tumbled out wrapped in petals, slapping the nearest guard in fury. Two coughing children spat sap right onto Cora's boots. She stared down at them. She looked at her splinter, then at him, muttering that his tree literally spit citizens. Valyriia flinched as a branch brushed her shoulder. Amazingly, the wood did not burn. It tapped her dark crown, then moved away like it rejected her as poor fertilizer. Valyriia looked both highly offended and deeply impressed by the rejection. The new tree surged upward as the suffocating black threads snapped one by one. Every cut Cora made healed instantly. Leia's cards glowed with incredible warm energy. Every falling elf landed breathing, furious or confused, which was a massive relief. The injured root speaker desperately tried to crawl back toward the old, dead stump. But the carnivorous plant tripped him with a vine and casually stole his shoe. The farmer let it keep it. Meanwhile, Nadia's archer card floated up from the mud. It hovered between Tobin and Leia. She was not fully back, at least not yet. The tree restored physical forms to the others, but Nadia had been used differently. She was split into the deck when the roots severed their final remaining bridges. That was the miracle's heavy price, but she survived, calling out to Tobin. Nadia spoke. Tobin reached for the card, then paused to look at him. He nodded. Tobin held it gently, 2 fingers on fragile glass. Nadia smiled from the card. She teased him for looking terrible. He broke down, laughing and crying. Tobin joked about her card master status. Marriage changes people, he thought. Leaped out to wipe a painted tear, only to get smacked back by Leia. Not now, Leia snapped. The clown obeyed, showing him how terrifying she could be. The surviving elves slowly gathered around the massive base of the New World tree. They turned their intense gaze onto him, so he quickly pointed toward Leia. He declared her the rulemaker, leaving Illa looking absolutely horrified at the decision. She argued she was too young, but the old leaders fed people to trees. With the bar that low, several elves flinched. Suddenly, Cora stepped forward. She stood by Leia, raising the sacred splinter to guide her fighters. They would clear the remaining Blackar roots under Leia's direct command. The warriors stared at their broken saint, then bowed to both ladies. Cora grimaced but accepted the gesture. Her old authority was finally returning. She was no longer just a lethal weapon, but a leader who protected. She had learned to fight without losing the hostage. Valyriia watched silently. Her eyes narrowed as she accused him of building a new alliance. He claimed he was just delegating the massive task of forest cleanup. Valyriia scoffed just as Nadia's card slowly turned to face her. The entire clearing went freezing as ancient grief and royal pride clashed. Standing in the mud, Nadia offered a respectful bow to Queen Valyriia. The queen remained cold, but thanked the card's spirit for sparing her daughter. Nadia glanced at him, admitting he had a way of doing that. Valyriia looked deeply annoyed as Leia turned to address the remaining elves. She declared that no dark roots or stolen gifts would remain here. Every soul must be awake to choose. Suddenly, a young elf spoke. The rescued young elf questioned the deck, and Leia proudly raised it high. As if responding, the world tree rustled, touching a branch to the deck. For a terrifying moment, he feared the tree would steal his gift. Instead, the branch carved a beautiful green gate directly onto the deck. It was an offering of deep trust, letting the forest join them. Everyone in the clearing felt it immediately. Ashgrove was finally reborn. Leia was now the vital bridge that nobody could easily ignore. Korra's elite warriors found a new path that didn't require shedding blood. They all united under what locals called the Havocer Alliance. He grumbled about the unorganized name, but nobody listened. Then Valyriia reacted, and trust me, it makes everything so much worse. She stood beneath the tree, surrounded by a dark, golden aura. The tree's ancient branches leaned away from her power in absolute respect. Her cold eyes scanned the elves, the cards, and her allies. She watched Tobin clutch Nadia's card as Leia issued her orders. Finally, her heavy gaze landed directly on him, filthy and exhausted. You keep refusing thrones, she warned, so the world will build something worse. That sounded like a threat, but it was just an observation. Right then, the new tree dropped a single apple right into Ethan's hands, small, red, and rude enough to hit his knuckles. Valyriia looked at the apple, then at Ethan, saying the world does not need another king, she said it needs a farmer. Since everyone was afraid to disappoint, Ethan hated how much that sounded like responsibility. He thought planting a single tree meant one kingdom was safe until another city tried to build a new Valyriia right under a hospital. Once Ashgrove joined the Havocer Alliance, people stopped asking whether his farm could help. They started asking what he would do next, and he hated that question. The next answer was Iron Ridge, because Ashgrove's warning had teeth. Another city was actually trying to build a new Valyriia under a hospital. Before they chased that nightmare, they needed blades to cut those black gear roots out of living bodies before Valyriia simply solved the problem with fire. Iron Ridge's answer had been legendary ore. Ethan arrived at their forge city with a simple kitchen knife wrapped in a dish towel, which was not the image of leadership anyone wanted, though it was unfortunately the tool that had kept slicing through problems. Before he even understood them, the rule was clear before they crossed the Iron Ridge gate. Without better blades, every rescue would turn into Valyriia burning. Corruption out of hostages, one body at a time. But if he handed his farm tools to a faction, every group after that would learn the wrong lesson. They would not ask for help. Instead, they would demand ownership. Valyriia walked beside Ethan, under a plain travel cloak, looking at the mountain gates like they had personally bored her. She told him to give her the location of the roots, saying she would efficiently remove the problem with fire, words that had become quite different words since Ethan met her. Korra limped behind them with a farm splinter tucked through her belt like a holy insult, agreeing that if the gear was inside a soldier, fire would punish them first. Valyriia gave her a cold glance, saying she had not asked the sword student. Korra smiled with one corner of her mouth. Good, Ethan answered anyway, and that was how he knew Korra was healing. Broken experts are polite, but recovering experts become annoying again. Iron Ridge did not look like a city so much as an argument with a mountain. Massive black chimneys punched out of red stone. Water wheels groaned as dwarf guards watched them from metal balconies. Every single one of them stared at his dish towel before looking at his face. Rumors had beaten them there, which was getting old. A forge herald shouted from the gate, announcing that Ethan Bramwell of Havocer carried the blade that cut cursed roots. In Ashgrove, he replied that he only carried a knife, making the crowd lean forward as the dish towel shifted. The kitchen knife inside let out a soft ring. Every forge hammer in the outer yard stopped mid-swing. Valyriia looked delighted, noting that his cutlery had intimidated the workers. He missed when Fork stayed quiet. A dwarf guard led them straight into the central forge yard. No council hall, no map room, no polite waiting chamber where men in hats converted danger into empty speeches. Fortunately, King Amos had better instincts. He stood right beside a black anvil. Under the open sky, short, broad, and still enough that the whole forge yard used him as its center without asking. His beard was bound with iron rings, his hands completely bare. Every dwarf around him wore gloves except him. He looked at Ethan's towel, then up at his face. Amos ordered him to show him, while a man nearby laughed. Before he could unwrap it, a stranger pushed forward, too tall, polished, and arrogant. He wore a merchant's red coat, carrying a glass case with a black plate inside. The surrounding crowd gave him the sour space reserved for a truly foul odor. One they couldn't openly insult yet, the forge scammer bowed toward King Amos, asking to show a real relic before the farmer dirtied the anvil. To demonstrate a proper relic, under her hood, Valyria's eyes suddenly warmed. That wasn't warmth, it was pure homicidal intent. The young farmer quickly grabbed her sleeve. Telling her he'd been called worse by chickens, he watched the scammer lift the black plate. Out of the glass case, he claimed it was unbreakable demon bone alloy. Impervious to dragon flame, black gear bites, and queen-class magic. Meanwhile, Mariold, who had been hiding behind the gate and pretending to be a scaly hill, slowly opened a single golden eye. The scammer saw it, his face losing some color. But he doubled down anyway, because a liar always fears silence more than the truth. He placed the fake relic on the anvil and struck it hard with his hammer. The hammer bounced, the crowd murmured in surprise, and the scammer smiled, boasting that the kingdom needed relics, not kitchen scrap. But King Amos didn't smile. He stared at the plate, then the hammer, noticing a tiny smear of black residue. The dark substance crawled along the metal. As his jaw tightened, a young worker reached out. But the residue snapped onto his glove, starting to crawl straight up his wrist. The crowd's boredom instantly turned to fear. A price of power now, soul later. The deadly cost had entered the yard disguised as a pitch. Valyriia raised her hand. No fire, the farmer whispered, as the black smear began biting through the worker's sleeve. Then he calmly unwrapped his simple kitchen knife. The entire yard suddenly recoiled. Not because it looked legendary, it literally looked like a regular kitchen knife. It had a plain handle, a tiny nick near the tip, and a slight stain. A mark at the base that could never be scrubbed away, and that made it worse. The experts knew something was deeply wrong when ordinary things didn't act ordinary. He stepped up to the forge worker, placing the flat blade right against the crawling smear. And barely moved his wrist. The black residue instantly split, no dramatic shrieks or smoke. It simply ceased to exist. The terrified forge worker stumbled backward, gasping for air. He was alive and very glad to breathe. Suddenly, the scammer's fake relic cracked right on the anvil, even though the farmer hadn't even touched it. The crack sliced the black plate before the knife even left the worker's sleeve. A clean, embarrassing line. The relic split in two, revealing cheap metal inside. Just painted bone and a tiny black seed hidden under a layer of wax. The forge guard fell silent. Then the entire crowd slowly turned on the scammer. Not with weapons, but with their eyes. For a public liar, that is far worse. A crowd realizing you sold them poison ruins your name, your outfit, and your future. The scammer backed away, stammering that this was sabotage, but King Amos finally moved, picking up half of the fake relic with a pair of metal tongs. He showed it to the crowd, then dropped it in pale water. It turned black. Every dwarf in the yard hissed through their teeth. The king glared at him, demanding to know why he brought black gear seed here and called it protection. The scammer glared at him, claiming he planted it. Bad choice. Valyriia stepped out of his grip, keeping her face hidden. She didn't need to show it, the forge shadows already bent toward her like terrified subjects remembering unpaid taxes. The scammer dropped to his knees. So fast his teeth clicked. King Amos looked at Valyria's shadow, then at him. Then at the kitchen knife, his suspicion turning to professional horror. Do not put that blade on my anvil, he warned. The chef froze. Why? Because that anvil had served Iron Ridge for 400 years, and he did not know if this kitchen knife respected retirement. Valyriia laughed. One dwarf guard quickly crossed himself with a heavy hammer. King Amos stepped closer to the knife, stopping 2 arm lengths away, keeping his hands off. That silent reaction spoke louder than any grand speech. The king of a forged city, who had just handled cursed metal like common garbage, refused to put his bare hand anywhere near this dish towel knife. What is it? Cora asked. King Amos kept his eyes locked on the blade, sensing something beyond metal. What was it? A rule. Atlas rattled inside the basket under his arm because the sacred sword had insisted on coming, hating to be ignored since he was a rule too. King Amos slowly looked toward the basket. The chef tightened the cloth, telling Atlas no. The king blinked. Did the basket complain? Best not to encourage it. The scammer tried to crawl away during the brief distraction, but Marigold lowered one claw right in front of him. He stopped. The young worker who sleeved the chef had cut free dropped to one knee in front of King Amos, calling him Majesty. The stain had stopped, no retreat. It simply ended. King Amos nodded grimly. Death. Rule, the entire forge guard murmured, the phrase spreading faster than smoke. Death. Rule, the chef did not like it, but Valyriia did, calling it useful. No, he insisted. Everyone stared. That was quite a lesson, telling a demon queen no in a dwarf. Forge carries serious acoustics. He held the knife up by the handle, declaring it went back. To his kitchen, a dozen dwarf faces fell, the scammer still trapped under. Marigold's massive shadow actually looked relieved. The chef pointed the knife toward the cracked fake relic. They could study what it ended and make tools to help. Cut people free, but absolutely nobody owned this knife, and nobody borrowed it without him. There nobody sells copies, nobody puts a crown, seal, contract, or guild stamp on it. King Amos stared at him. Valyria's smile thinned while Cora whispered a soft approval. He kept going before his courage expired, stating he was not building an armory for people who thought hostages were acceptable raw material. Instantly, the forge guard changed. Dwarves understand ownership. They know tools and lines. You never cross because crossing them turns honest craft into theft. King Amos turned toward the crowd. Iron Ridge would make gear shears under Havanacker rules. It would cut corruption from living bodies, but never seize a farmer's tool, nor claim a farmer's land. They would not sell death as protection. The forge yard struck hammer to stone once. The heavy sound echoed through the city. That was Iron Ridge joining the Havanacker alliance. No treaty, no grand feast, no signatures, just king publicly refusing to claim the knife everyone now wanted, then a forge. And of course, an apprentice tried to help and totally ruined the moment. He stepped forward with palms open, suggesting if the knife was a rule, perhaps it chose worthy hands. The dish towel snapped around the handle all on its own, quite violently. It slapped his fingers and tied itself into a tight knot. The apprentice stumbled back while three older dwarves laughed so hard that one dropped a hammer on his own boot. King Amos did not laugh. He looked at the knot, then at him. Even. He says the cloth enforces ownership and has been around Valyriia too long. She looks pleased. That tiny public embarrassment did some useful work. It showed everyone in Iron Ridge what his words never could. The tool rules were active. This was about survival, not manners. Then the scammer makes his final mistake. He spits, yelling that they will all kneel to Arclight once Dr. Quaid pays triple. That name ruins the mood instantly. King Amos glares as Valyriia freezes. The young man does not know Dr. Quaid yet, but the tension is heavy. Every leader in Iron Ridge reacts as if a foul plague has just been unleashed. Realizing his mistake too late, the scammer shuts his mouth. Marigold taps a giant claw on the stone. It cracks. The scammer starts confessing in a total panic. Arclight pays for relic shells, he screams. They take sealed medical crates with no questions asked. He never saw inside. King Amos barks an order to a dwarf guard. Everyone starts running. No time for plans or heroic goodbyes. They reach the rail yard just in time. A massive black train screams from the mountains, pulling 6 sealed medical cars. It heads straight for Arclight Dominion, marked with plain hospital crosses. The logos are stamped over fresh black wax. Valyriia stares, her face turning pale. She warns that those are definitely not healing marks. King Amos grabs heavy shears. He shoves the newly forged weapons into the hands of 3 dwarf riders. They are hot, rough, and ugly. Amos warns that the route goes through Gear Country. If Arclight is smuggling black shells, his city is going to war. The young man wants to argue, but the train whistle drowns him out. He climbs aboard with his wrapped kitchen knife, immediately regretting this decision. Leaving his peaceful porch was a massive, terrible mistake. The train does not even make it halfway. Heavy chains snap across the tracks. The engine shrieks. The lead medical car lifts clean off the metal rails. It slams down hard, throwing him directly into Valyriia. She catches him easily. Holding him by the collar, she dryly tells him to be careful. Suddenly, masked raiders drop from the cliffs. They ignore the passengers. Instead of looting cargo, they charge straight for the sealed hospital cars. These are definitely no ordinary bandits, and their fierce leader proves it. She lands on the roof, rolls under a blast from a dwarf rifle, and strikes. With perfect precision, she cuts the wax seal without breaking the glass. She is angry, not greedy. Valyriia steps out to intervene. He grabs Valyria's wrist. That habit is going to cost him an arm. He warns her not to kill until they find out what is happening. The raider leader hears them and turns, her mask cracked across one cheek. Her eyes are sharp as she calls them smarter than the dwarf guards. King Amos, hanging out of the next car with his hammer, barks back. He yells that he heard her. The raider leader just shouts back. She tells him to stop defending the cargo. Suddenly, the crate pulses. The wax seals split open. A terrifying black thread shoots straight out. It wraps around a dwarf rider's wrist and crawls under his flesh. King Amos throws the rough shears. Cora catches them and moves instantly. Using a precise, sweeping motion, she cuts the thread clean off the rider. The rider collapsed, still breathing. King Amos stared at the shears like a disappointed father watching his child. Seeing the wound, the raider leader quickly changed plans fast. She stopped fighting and pointed at the crates. Open all of them right now, or everyone here becomes fuel. Valyria's eyes darkened instantly. The young traveler quietly stepped forward and raised his kitchen blade, making her flinch. He was only cutting the wax seal, ignoring her warnings. Ignorance never once stopped anyone here. The blade touched the wax. It broke. The crate slid open. No medicine lay inside, only a tube filled with black water. A curved shadow shard floated within, looking like an old crown. Valyriia froze. A second crate suddenly split wide open. Inside was a dark lock of hair, suspended in black fluid. The third crate split apart after a heavy kick from the leader. Inside sat a black scale pulsing as Valyriia drew closer. Every piece turned toward her like a hungry mouth hearing its name. The leader unmasked. This is wild. The guards saw her face and dropped their weapons in terror. King Amos swore under his breath. She looked at the traveler first, staring at him, not Valyriia. That was either pure courage or a massive mistake. She introduced herself as Rhea Arkite. This cargo is not weapons. Valyria's dark aura flared, but Rhea did not retreat. She pointed at the pulsing fragments inside the crates. They were reaching for the queen. It was her actual body, Rhea Arkite revealed. She did not lead them to a throne, but deep under a hospital. That choice spoke volumes about this dominion before anyone spoke a word. Palaces hide pride, but hospitals quietly bury sins beneath clean floors. The guard at the basement gate saw Valyria's face and trembled. He whispered about the dead tyrant, looking at the cargo behind her. Seeing her hair floating in dark water, he bowed by reflex. Valyriia smiled as his spear bent without her touching it. Rhea Arkite stepped between them, warning that the soldier was only acting on lies. Valyria's cold eyes remained on him. The traveler quietly gripped his wrapped knife. They were only here for the cargo. The guard stared in disbelief. A boy with a towel-wrapped blade made no sense. Then a click echoed. A black gear beneath his armor split open like an eye. He screamed, clawing at his chest as Rhea Arkite caught him. That horror drove her. The mechanical gear pulsed once, deep below. Hundreds echoed back. The rule of this basement became very clear. If that machine woke up, it would construct a false queen. It would build her from stolen parts and stolen innocent souls. If Valyriia destroyed it, every linked soldier would die with it. Valyriia heard the gears. Her shadow suddenly flooded the entire hallway. Where was the culprit? A calm voice answered her from ahead. He called her historically inconvenient, revealing himself to be Dr. Quaid. The doctor stepped into the light, wearing a spotless white coat. That clean look made the traveler hate him. Honest work is dirty. In this crisis, his uniform is stained. Behind him, 2 rows of gearbund. Soldiers raise their rifles with hands shaking against their own orders. Doctor Quaid stares right at Rhea. The runaway returns with raiders, dwarves, a farmer. In the original template, there she is back, the soldiers behind Rhea shift. Some look at her like they have waited years just to recognize her. Rhea does not waste time on a speech. Instead, she grabs a dying soldier by his armor and pulls him up. Breathe, she tells him, that does more for her authority than any royal crown ever could. Quaid smiles at this. Compassion is inefficient when the body has already accepted his improvements. The gear inside the soldier's chest bites deeper. He screams again. Valyriia steps forward. The farmer grabs her sleeve, but she does not look back. No mass destruction. The doctor called him a template. They say he is beneath the hospital using the farmer's bones. She knows, and he is holding her sleeve. Because if she attacks, the farmer gets hit first. That makes Rhea cough once. Which might have been a laugh if this hallway were not packed with armed hostages. Dr. Quaid's eyes drift to the farmer, then to his weapons, then to the food. Basket still strapped to his chest. Apparently, survival means carrying lunch. An agricultural anomaly, the doctor says. The farmer just prefers being useful. Valyria's shadow looms large on the wall behind Quaid. Doctor. Quaid does not even flinch. That is highly unsettling until the gearbound soldiers flinch for him instead. What a coward, his courage is stolen. The rifles rise. Rhea yells out for them not to fire. Some soldiers listen, but their gears do not. Black metal teeth lock around their wrists, pulling triggers. Korra moves first. She flows into a smooth touch-up motion. Heavy iron shears in one hand, farm. Splinter in the other. Incoming bullets turn sideways in midair, burying themselves right into the walls. King Amos, who followed them down with 3 dwarf riders and absolutely zero patience, just stares. Those shears were not made for dancing. Korra cleanly slices a gear cable off a soldier's wrist. They are learning. The soldier drops, still alive. Rhea shoves him back, ordering him out. 2 rebels move to help. Dr. Quaid lifts a single finger. A gear tooth opens on the soldier's throat. The man stops breathing instantly. Rhea freezes. Quaid looks at them with his clean, dead smile. Everyone in this facility is connected. Cut blindly, he warns, and you only prove his point. Valyria's aura sharpens fiercely. Cracking the tile floor, he has built the ultimate coward's fortress, a villain, hiding behind the pain of the very people he broke, so they go deeper. Not because they are invited, but because Rhea kicks the heavy doors open. Korra cuts the trigger cables as Valyria walks through the rifle line like hatred itself. The farmer follows with his basket, trying not to think about how ridiculous his life has become. Chasing a final boss into a dark basement, the soul reactor sits beneath the hospital chapel. No stained glass or candles, just a sterile white circular chamber with beds lining the walls and dark tubes running into a central glass cradle. Unconscious soldiers line the beds. Some are old, some are young, and some have missing limbs replaced by heavy, black gear frames, every mechanical gear ticks in perfect sync with those strange crates from the train. Inside, floating, is a body with Valyria's hair, her crown line, and none of Valyria's sheer weight was the worst part. The false queen looked almost normal until he stood beside the real one. Then she looked empty in a way skin should never be. Valyria remained silent as the chamber lights dimmed and Dr. Quaid walked to the other side of the cradle and touched the glass, claiming the arc-like dominion survived because he rejected superstition. The queen once conquered the world, and a controlled queen could defend it forever. Rhea's voice cut across the room, accusing him of feeding their wounded to it instead of preserving them. A soldier on a nearby bed turned. Half his face was metal, his single human eye finding Rhea. Princess, he whispered. There was the word, not from some herald or a formal document, but from a dying soldier who still knew exactly who had come back to save him. Rhea's face hardened, but she did not correct him. The rebels behind her straightened up upon hearing it. Dr. Quaid frowned, showing his first honest emotion he had shown. Turning to the cradle, he ordered the ascent to begin. Black tubes pulsed and every soldier arched in agonizing pain. Suddenly, Valyria vanished. In 1 second, she was standing right beside him. The next, her hand gripped Dr. Quaid's throat. He smiled through the choking pressure, raising a dead man's switch. Every single soldier's gear snapped open. Kill me, he choked out, and the queen wakes. Hungry, Valyria's grip tightened. He stepped toward the cradle, a completely stupid move. But it was also the one place nobody expected him to go. The false queen's eyes snapped open. They were entirely black. Not Valyria black, but a deep, empty void, just like a bottomless cellar. The stolen fragments inside the train crates melted right into her. Hair, scales, crown shards, and ancient bone. Black tubes pumped into her, fueled by soldiers who had paid too high a price for one man's twisted ambition. She stared at Valyria, then at him, whispering the word source. Dr. Quaid's smile widened. Yes, recognize the anomaly, he urged. He hated being recognized by basement projects, so he simply opened the food basket. Valyria's head snapped toward him, telling him no. Dr. Quaid blinked while Rhea stared, asking what he was doing. Feeding the problem. Valyria's voice went dangerously soft, warning him that the food was hers. It was just a jar of stew packed for him. The thing wearing her face would not get a single bite. That explanation did not soothe her, but she looked less likely to crush his spine. Before the reactor could kill them all, he pulled out a small covered jar of pepper stew, the exact kind that made Valyria sweat. Claim his couch and pretend their research was a normal living arrangement. The false Queen stared at the jar, her throat twitching with a hollow appetite. That bizarre sight made Valyria's expression turn cold in an entirely new way. Dr. Quaid laughed, asking if farm soup could really stop a structured resurrection. No, he replied, he just thought everyone kept underestimating leftovers. He dipped a spoon and held it to the false queen's mouth. The chamber leaned toward this exact moment. Dr. Quaid did not stop him, which was his ultimate mistake. Some smart people are too clever to fear simple soup. The false queen swallowed, and the reaction was instant. Blinding gold light cracked beneath her skin as she shrieked with countless voices. Not a single voice was Valyria's. She echoed hundreds of soldiers, patients, and battlefield echoes, fragments stolen from graves, wounds, and gearbound bodies. The simple soup did not evolve her, it utterly rejected the theft. Her body bowed violently backward as black water poured from her mouth, turning clear midair before it fell. Falling like rain over the beds, every soldier gasped at once, the gears in their chests loosened by a single notch. Dr. Quaid finally panicked, screaming that it was a beautiful word when it came from him. A dark tube snapped toward the stew jar, as if the reactor realized the smallest object in the room was ruining their biggest lie. He grabbed the jar, but the tube wrapped his wrist. Valyriia cut it with a single fingernail before the kitchen knife even left his belt. She did not burn the soldier connected to it. Instead, she sliced only the hunger reaching through him. The soldier on the bed stopped screaming. Valyriia looked annoyed by her own precision. She warned him not to make her practice mercy, but he replied it was too late. Valyriia released his throat and stepped to the cradle. The false queen stared back at her with hollow eyes splitting into human colors, releasing one stolen soul at a time. Valyriia reached through the glass, which melted around her wrist. He thought she was going to shatter the body. Instead, she gently pressed 2 fingers to its forehead. "You are not me," Valyriia told her. The false queen shuddered, whispering that it knew. And its voice finally sounded relieved. The body cracked into streams of clear water and black teeth. Rhea moved fast, shouting to clear the beds first. The rebels obeyed, not out of royal duty, but because she focused on saving living people. Before even looking at the throne-shaped horror in the middle of the room, that was how Rhea Arclight reclaimed her rule, by making rescue the very first order anyone heard. Cora sliced through cable after cable with iron shears, keeping each motion slow enough to avoid tearing the soldiers apart. King Amos pried the heavy gear frames open with tongs while dwarf riders caught collapsing bodies. From above, Marigold broke through the chapel floor from above, because all secrecy had abandoned them hours ago, pinning 3 gear columns under her massive claw. Valyriia walked from bed to bed, she never resorting to fire, only pure extraction. A dark gear opened under her hand, trying to bite but froze instantly as her aura enveloped the soldier instead of the metal. She plucked the gear out like a deep thorn. The freed soldier screamed, then breathed. Across the room, another gear crawled toward a young child near the wall. Rhea threw herself in the way, letting the gear bite her armored sleeve. He sliced it off with his kitchen knife before Valyriia could incinerate the entire corner of the chamber. The threat ended. Rhea stared down at the slash, then up at him, whispering that his knife was terrible, and she missed when it only sliced onions. Dr. Quaid fled toward the master console. Control was his final option. Weakened villains always reach for levers as if they offer salvation. He slammed his hand onto the console. Absolutely nothing happened. The decoy queen was gone, and the trapped souls were escaping. The core held no energy left but the destructive fury he engineered. The glass cradle slid open behind him. Dr. Quaid spun around, realizing this chamber was no longer his fortress. It was an open grave. Dark tendrils lashed around his wrists. The doctor screamed in horror as the reactor dragged him backward into the chamber designed for his puppet queen. Rhea raised her sword, but he grabbed her wrist. She glared at him. "He used them," she growled, but he replied that the doctor was already paying. Dr. Quaid slammed his palms against the glass as the device activated, but there were no lingering souls to fuel the flames. No puppet, no army, no escape. He was entirely alone with his hollow invention. The chamber sealed, muffling his desperate screams into a faint buzz. Valyriia stared at the glass, offering to shatter it, but Rhea trembled under his hand. Then she watched the soldiers being carried away while the patients slowly woke, and the rebels lowered their weapons with no enemies left in those beds. "Leave him right where everyone can see what this machine costs." Rhea said that was not mercy, but something better, a public consequence. Dr. Quaid banged one fist against the glass, but nobody helped him. The gearbound soldiers crawled from their beds alive, some could stand, others needed carrying, some cursed Rahia, because deep pain always looks for a target. She took the blame, standing in that ruined chapel basement with bloodied sleeves. She ordered the entire hospital opened up immediately. No more locked wards. She demanded no hidden rooms and no cybernetics without real consent. Feed patients first, telling them to arrest her guards last. A rebel captain stared at her, princess the palace, but she cut him off. It can wait. The soldiers heard her. The entire hospital did. A stairwell guard tried to force the old order back, aiming his rifle right at Rhea and shouting that the royals had absolutely no authority in this emergency. But a scarred, crippled soldier threw his own heavy body forward to block the shot. The rifle went off, sending a bullet into the ceiling as dust rained. Down, Rhea caught the falling soldier. The guard stared around at the patients, at Dr. Quaid trapped in his glass box, and then at Valyriia standing completely still beside the empty cradle. Slowly, his hand opened, dropping the gun. Nobody clapped. Clapping would have ruined the moment. They just quietly carried the wounded out faster. Word reached the Argite Dominion before night, not from some official decree, but from doors swinging open and survivors walking out. That was the real truth. Valyriia had not just destroyed the fake queen, she had refused to let a copy dictate who gets to be human. Rhea had not grabbed power through war, but through rescue. Dr. Quaid was not sent to some fancy courtroom to give slick speeches. Instead, he sat trapped inside his own reactor, desperately tapping on the glass. As the survivors ignored him, for a second, he thought the nightmare ended. But wait, a dark shadow was already creeping from the broken cradle drain. A drop of black water slowly crawled out, defying gravity itself. No body. No face, just a freezing dark bead colder than the entire basement. Valyriia spun around while Marigold snarled, but the bead slipped between the tiles. Suddenly, the beginner system flashed right in front of his eyes, warning of an unknown dark fragment heading to the farm. He closed the screen too late, the alarm already screaming in his mind. That dark water reached the farm long before they did, expecting a battlefield, but instead, it immediately triggered Valyria's clever pantry alarm. It was not some epic siren, just 3 copper pans clattering against the wall, 2 jam jars blocking the door, and Bolt howling wildly from the porch like someone stole his oil. He could hear it ringing in his head as the Argite hospital smoked. Valyriia heard it too. Her face went blank, murmuring about their precious pantry shelf. She turned toward him slowly, which was terrible timing for the stolen pudding bowl he had wrapped in a towel back at the Argite kitchen. Ezin convinced himself the tiny hot spring behind the smokehouse was private enough. For just one stupid question, he was going to ask whether research conditions had become home. Valyria's eyes dropped to the bundle under his arm. Is that dessert? She asked later, he said. Then dark water attacked his house. That was the story of his life by then. Every time he tried to be normal, an ancient horror took it personally. Marigold flew them back faster than the weather. Rhea arclights. Riders followed along the rail. King Amos sent dwarf wagons full of rough iron ridge shears. Korev rode with one hand on Mabel and a Tai Chicha pamphlet tucked into her armor. Leia and Tobin sent cardboards ahead until the sky looked like a panicked paper migration. Honestly, none of that made him feel prepared. The rule was simple and awful. If dark water corrupted Havenacre, every gift he had ever made could turn into a weapon pointed back at the people he gave it to. If he destroyed the farm to stop that, he would lose the quiet life he had refused. A prophecy to protect. Valyria's solution was ready before they landed. Burn the infected acres, she said. No, he argued, you have not seen them yet. They are his acres, they may already be its teeth. Then we pull the teeth, she countered. She looked at him like he had suggested dentistry for a thunderstorm. Marigold dropped them at the Northfield. Havenacre was still standing. That was the first mercy. It was also a trap. The farmhouse windows glowed black. The monster guards at the fence were frozen in place, heads lowered, dark water leaking from their eyes. The chicken coop had turned around to face the road by itself, which felt rude even. During an invasion, the pantry door was open. Inside, jam jars shook on the pepper bundles twisted like snakes. Valyria's blue mug floated in the air with black water crawling around the rim. Valyriia stepped forward. The mug cracked. The air changed. A voice came from the sink. The rain barrel and every wet footprint in the yard at once. Queen. Fragment returned. Source located. Gifts indexed. Bolt barked and fired his chest. Hatch. The white beams hit the black water pouring out of the well. The water Swallowed it, Bolt staggered. That scared him more than the voice. Then the voice corrected itself. Name Ezen. Valyria's eyes narrowed. Dark water. Learned manners. Azarin spoke through the rain barrel, claiming manners are handles. All gifts have handles. The true deck screamed from Illa's card bird before she even reached the gate. The paper bird burst over the porch and spilled cards. Across the mud, the shield card flashed, then grew teeth along its edges. The beast card bent backward. The clown card came out wrong, half smiling, half drowned. Leia arrived breathless. Tobin stood at her side with Nadia. Nadia's archer card glowing in his hand. Leia saw the corrupted cards and reached for them. He shouted to ask first. She froze. Darkwater roots snapped out of the mud toward her wrists. Tobin moved between them and raised the shield card. With both hands, may we defend. The shield slammed down, the teeth on its edge turned outward. That one word changed the gift. It did not bite Leia. It bit the root. The root screamed black water into the grass. Nadia's archer card lit up, her painted bow pulled back by itself. Targets, Leia asked. Dark water only, he said. Nadia fired. The arrow pinned the black stream to the fence post without touching the monster guard trapped beside it. That was the first victory of their final attack. The deck didn't become safe just because they understood the rules. It stayed secure because Leia remembered them under intense pressure. Asin shifted through the well to record the rule. That sounded bad, Tobin muttered. He agreed that it usually was. Right then, the shelter wagon crashed onto the road. Behind the grills, Nell Quill leapt down with Rel riding on her shoulder, and 3 terrified children behind sacks of bread. Nell muttered. She told them to stay. Stonebridge, one child raised a hand, but Rawl quickly shut them down. Rawl pointed its wooden spoon at the farmhouse like a tiny, determined commander. The pantry floor split wide open. A dark abyss yawned beneath the kids. Rawl jumped, hitting the floor first, spoon down, its stitched shield shining blazing silver. The mouth snapped down on the spoon and stopped. Rel shook. Nell grabbed the doll's seam. No. She wouldn't let the doll fight alone, pressing both hands onto Rawl's glowing mark. The cursed threads that once made these puppets terrifying flared up, but the magical farm magic kept them stable. It formed a massive silver shield protecting the children, the wagon, and the pantry entrance. Valyriia eyed the doll, muttering that toothy cloth was quite useful. Rel saluted without lowering that spoon as Azarin poured more black liquid through the cracks. Dolls, cards, blades, roots, dragons, dogs, and queens were all properly catalogued. Then Atlas flew from the umbrella stand, landing hilt first right in his grip. The sword announced the final strike was authorized at last, while the system flashed nearby, confirming the hero root was restored. Time to strike. He stared at the dark liquid seeping across his porch, the kids sheltering behind Rawl, and the monster guards trapped inside their bodies. Valyriia stood fiercely in front of his home, facing a void that wanted to catalog her like simple cargo. Without hesitation, he plunged Atlas straight into the dirt beside the fence. The blade made a deafening noise, groaning that it wasn't a mere post. He declared it was today. The fence flared blue as Asin crashed into the barrier and bounced away. This legendary sword of prophecy was finally being useful by getting a big demotion. Atlas went silent for one beautiful second, then Mabel landed beside it. Cora swung her recovered axe with both hands, treating it not as a following her focused breathing. She raised and turned. Settle, then chop. She sliced the black root, wrapping Atlas, avoiding the glowing fence completely. Mabel hummed smugly, prompting Atlas to warn her not to enjoy this. Mabel's blade angled close, calling it a shiny post. With the farm half drowning, he almost laughed out loud. Suddenly, the well exploded, sending a dark water column high above. Havocer, filled with unfamiliar, terrifying faces and voices he prayed were no longer alive. The dark mass reached toward the dirt roads, fields, pantry, deck, and dolls. The blade tucked inside his coat, and the world tree mark on Leia's cards. Every gift that ever left his hands now returned wrapped in someone else's incredible courage. King Amos burst onto the scene at both the worst and best possible moment. His wagon bounced hard, spilling a heavy crate of iron shears all over the yard. Dwarf riders cursed loudly as one blade slid beneath a black root, accidentally slicing it. The connection snapped. King Amos grinned, shouting that at least the ugly ones worked. He tossed a pair to Rhea, who caught them cleanly and severed a black water cord from her own guard before it slit his throat. The soldier fell, still breathing, and instantly rolled over to protect a monster guard instead of killing it. Rhea witnessed this brave choice, commanding everyone to save first and strike second. The soldiers obeyed immediately. Arclight actually looked useful without machinery, while King Amos reached for the towel on Ethan's belt. Ethan slapped his hand away. Amos blinked as Ethan pulled out his kitchen knife. No borrowing. Amos grinned, glad to see it was still his. Suddenly a dark water root smashed through the porch and wrapped tightly around Bolt's front leg. Bolt tried to blast it, but the root swallowed the first energy pulse and crawled up his metal chest. Ethan ran, but Valyriia grabbed his coat, warning that the monster wanted him close. He argued they had his dog, but Valyriia warned of the trap. Ethan went anyway. Valyriia cursed in an ancient tongue, sending the chickens into a wild panic as Ethan slid beneath Bolt's chest, cutting the root off his leg with the knife. Instantly, the severed root withered away, disconnected from its source. Bolt's eyes flickered, his tail clicked once. Porch protocol, Ethan commanded, and Bolt staggered up. The farmhouse answered the call. The windmill spun backward, and the laundry lines snapped into a web. The smokehouse chimney split wide open. The rain barrel, possessed by a hostile ancient voice, shot 20 feet into the air and dumped black water across the field. The ground drank the liquid, then spat it back as a swarm of tiny black seeds. They rained over the mud, each growing a tiny, hungry mouth. Art's laughter echoed through every single one. System source corrupted. Valyriia stepped forward, her massive aura unfolding with more raw power than she had displayed since the initial farm attack that started this entire nightmare. The ground crystallized into glass beneath her boots. The sky over Havocer turned black at the edges. Every ally froze because this powerhouse was no longer pretending to be a simple houseguest. Ain rose to meet her, transforming into a massive tower of black water with a beating heart-shaped core. Queen, the monster hissed, you were built for conquest. Valyriia flashed a beautiful, vicious smile, declaring she was built by herself. She struck, splitting the dark water. For a second, Ethan believed it was over. Then every monster guard screamed. Every child behind Rel cried out. Every single gear-scarred soldier Rhea had brought fell to their knees. Azarin had linked its dark heart to every living soul here. Valyriia hesitated, freezing before landing her second blow. That was a massive change. Honestly, who would have believed this back when she crashed into Ethan's squash patch? The Demon Queen wanted her killed, but stopped. The lives caught in the consequence were not disposable. Azra noticed and mockingly declared her attachment indexed. Valyria's eyes burned. He hated that robotic voice for using the exact right word before either of them could even process it. Then the world tree answered, a vibrant green root erupted from the road out of nowhere. Then came another, and then a dozen more. Ashgrove's new tree surged through Leia's permission mark, not wanting to conquer Havocer but to protect the living souls Azarin had marked. Suddenly, Nadia's archer card glowed in Topin's hand. Ethan, Nadia's voice echoed, your farm is trying to remember what every gift was for. Those words gave Ethan his answer, not an explanation, but a clear duty. He reached into his coat and pulled out the Ashgrove apple, the very one the New World Tree had tossed to him like some strange, rude prophecy. Though bruised from travel, he broke it open to find a single seed, red, gold, and warm. The beginner system flashed once more, offering a final strike. Completion guaranteed. Ethan dismissed the screen, but a second panel immediately popped up. It stated alternative action was unavailable. Ignoring it, Ethan dug into the mud with his bare hands. Saw him, and every hungry seed mouth turned toward the hole. The system warned of source cultivation, just planting. Ethan corrected as the mouths lunged and Law played. Shield, Rahl holds his spoon. Cora and Mabel chop while King Amos's shears cut. Rhea's soldiers drag the trapped bodies behind the world tree roots. Marigold lands on Azarin's water spine, pinning it to the field with both front claws. Bolt opens his chest hatch, but he does not fire. He inhales. The black water around the porch pulls toward him, not into his core but into the laundry line web, the smokehouse chimney, the fence posts, and Atlas in the ground. Every ridiculous farm trap Bolt ever built without telling him. Good boy, the farmer says. Bolt wags his tail with bad timing and knocks over a pumpkin. The pumpkin rolls into a dark water mouth and explodes into orange vines. The vines grab 3 black seeds and stuff them into the compost. The compost belches smoke. Even Azarin pauses. Valyriia looks at the farmer through the chaos. Plant it, she says, no queenly voice in that command, just trust, which is somehow scarier. The farmer plants the seed. For 1 second, nothing happens. He hates that second. Then Havnaker recognizes its own gifts. The true deck flashes green and gold. Rahl's shield mark rings like a bell. Atlas stops complaining and roots deeper. Mabel's handle warms. The kitchen knife hums in the farmer's hand. the world tree roots open. Iron ridge shears light up along their ugly edges, Rhea's gear-scarred soldiers. Stand without pain, Marigold's scales catch fire without burning, bolts. Chest hatch glows white, Valyria's aura bends over the seed like a storm. Deciding to water a garden instead of flattening it, the seeds sprout. 1. Sapling becomes 10, 10 becomes a ring, a living orchard bursts across the torn line of the old Havenecker barrier, not a wall but a set of rules with leaves. Card. Gifts can bind but not own, doll shields can protect but not replace. Blades can cut corruption but not claim bodies, roots can hold life but not drink it, dragons can pin monsters without crushing hostages, dogs can guard without eating spells that are not theirs, queens can destroy only. After the living have somewhere safe to stand, the farmer does not know all of this as a theory but he sees it happen. The orchard catches every dark water handle and changes its grip. Azarin screams, the black water tower collapses inward. Dragged by its own stolen links into the red gold branches, faces pull free from the water and become breath, gear teeth turn into dead seeds and fall harmlessly into the mud. Valyriia walks into the orchard ring, Azarin's heart hangs there black and beating, pinned by Marigold's claw shadow, bolts traps. Nadia's arrow, Revel's spoon, Atlas's fence line, Mabel's cut, the knife's edge and the roots of a tree that has no interest in being a throne, the heart whispers for the queen to conquer. Valyriia looks at the farmer, the whole yard sees it, so do Rhea, Cora, Leia, Tobin, Nell, King Amos, Marigold, the soldiers, the children and every monster guard, still trying to decide if they have become livestock. He steps beside her. The romantic plan is completely gone, no hot ring, no pudding, no private words, just mud, black water, a ring of impossible trees. And everyone watching, so he asks the truth badly. Stay, he says. Valyria's eyes do not leave his. As research, she asks, or as pretension? Oh, as queen. Her smile starts small, hopeful, though he would have denied noticing that at the time. As what farmer? He gulps. His home is quieter when she is not invading it. Cora mutters that everything feels far less alive with him gone. Nadia's card whispers that it was terrible, begging them to let him finish. Ethan admits he wants her here, simply because he needs her. Valyriia turns away from him, toward the dark water heart, as Azarin pulses desperately. The entity whispers that attachment is leverage, but Valyriia simply reaches out. This time, the orchard shields every living thread of life from the dark heart. No hostages, no trapped soldiers, and no corrupted gifts remain in danger. Valyriia closes her hand, and the dark water heart suddenly shatters. It breaks with a wet little crack, like rotten fruit finally giving up. Azarin fades away in the east field as the orchard rains red gold petals. Silence grips Havenacker before the chickens suddenly attack the fallen petals. Normal life returns without much dignity as Valyriia stares at the birds. She looks at Ethan and laughs, but not with her terrifying old authority. It is a real laugh, victorious and hungry, meant for his ears alone. No battlefield divides them now, as she turns to the crowd on the porch. She declares the farm under her protection, making half the crowd start to kneel. She points at them and tells them not to kneel because it irritates Ethan. They freeze awkwardly halfway down as Valyriia steps closer to him. Taking his hand in front of everyone, she says she did not fall for a sword. She did not fall for a throne, but for the strength that fed his enemies. The strength that repaired curses, spared fools, and still told her no when she was wrong. Ethan's ears go red as Valyriia smiles and declares Ethan Bramwell is her partner. She announces Havenacker is her home, inviting anyone seeking peace to ask at the gate. But if they come to steal, they can ask the orchard about Darkwater's fate. That warning closes their story better than any grand prophecy ever could. The formidable final boss remains wild, and the old barrier never returns. It doesn't need to, as the peace orchard now grows along the roads. It guides newcomers inside correctly, while Tobin and Leia's cards secure the paths. Nell and Rawl check shelter wagons, while Cora trains the young Silverblade fighters. King Amos sends practical tools under surprisingly beautiful rules. Rhea's soldiers prioritize patience and understanding first. Marigold sleeps on the hill, pretending to hate being called Roof Dragon by the kids. Bold rejects 3 visiting officials for smelling too much like ownership. They hang a sign on the gate welcoming approved visitors only. Below that, Valyriia scrawls a warning that pantry rights are absolutely non-negotiable. He crosses out the word not, but she immediately scribbles right over his work. This is their new system of government now, showing up at last. The system pops up to declare the hero route incomplete. A brand new seed catalog unlocks, offering Peace Orchard seeds. Ethan stares at the glowing panel, then looks over at Valyriia resting comfortably on the couch. She holds her newly repaired mug and his very last bowl of pudding. She asks if the screen is offering him violence again as he clicks the seed catalog. For once, the system actually seems to speak his language.